one amendment to the agenda, additional report. Under community services.
Town of Nobleford, letter of support for speed reduction on Highway 519.
And are there any other additions to the agenda? Seeing none, can we have a motion, please?
Move up.
Oh, Bob.
Bob, oh yeah, Bob.
Can I get his hand up? As amended.
You sure it was not Bob's?
You sure? Not really. Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. The minutes of November the 1st council meeting, are there any errors or omissions?
I'll move the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
Sorry, what was that? Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay, let's move down to G1, pages 31 to 35, and that is bylaw 18-026, Bluestone Ranch. We don't need Steve, do we?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this first bylaw application is bylaw 18-026, which is the Bluestone Ranch Country Residential Area Structure Plan, and it is located in this, it's for the Southwest 32-820 west of the 4th, and it is to, as mentioned, it's for country residential development, and this is for first reading only. The Bluestone Area Structure Plan was submitted to the county about 1.5 years ago. Since that time, there has been some back and forth between the county and the applicant with regards to the plan and the contents of that plan. In essence, the area structure plan is looking to allow for 38 country residential parcels, approximately 2 acres in size, and then also one 30-acre parcel. The area structure plan, as presented, includes reports on the geotechnical evaluation, environmental assessment, traffic impact assessment, stormwater management, and a preliminary soils analysis. The larger agricultural title is currently zoned rural agriculture, and it has an irrigation pivot on it. The lands would be considered high quality agricultural land in accordance with the county's definitions in the land use bylaw. In the southwest portion of the quarter section, there are currently 6 acreages. They are zoned group country residential, which were previously subdivided out from a historical 40-acre parcel back in 1998. This application has been sent to external agencies for review, and an internal review will be completed, or has been completed, and a full report will be submitted at the time of the public hearing, along with the comments from those external agencies. It is anticipated that the public hearing would be held the second meeting in December. So with that, we are recommending that the bylaw be read for a first time. Any questions of council for this application?
Just one, Hillary, in our definitions in our bylaws, do we go by land classifications like class 1 soil, class 2 soil, and all that? So I'm just wondering how you arrive at your definition of quality agricultural land.
Yes, the definition for high quality agricultural land takes into consideration the land soil classification. So this, I do believe this is in a class 3, so it's not a class 1, or class 1 is the best, and then class 2 next, 3, and it goes down to 7. So this is class 3. The irrigation pivot on it makes it, bumps it up into a high quality agricultural production because you have the water to sustain better crop production. So yes, all of those things are taken into consideration in the definition.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One question. I'm not exactly know where is this?
Right across the road from Vista Meadows.
If you look on the screen here, Councillor Zeenstra, this is Vista Meadows up here. I'll scroll up just a bit so you can see Highway 512. It's just up here, and so it's half a mile from Highway 512 to the south, and kitty corner, as I would call kitty corner, to Vista Meadows.
I shouldn't have said right across, it's kitty corner.
It's practically across. And the Canamex corridor would be going through about a half mile away too.
Any other questions? Need a motion then for Ken? First reading. Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay. Let's move down to pages 36 to 39, bylaw 18027, the Queen's Amendment of Land Use, Group Country Residential.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this next application is related to the area structure plan that we just discussed, the Bluestone Ranch area structure plan. They've decided to apply for the zoning concurrently with the area structure plan. So this application is to amend the land use bylaw to amend the zoning of that parcel from rural agriculture to group country residential. And it's this is supported by that area structure plan bylaw. So I won't go into too much detail on that as we kind of just went through the context of this area, but the recommendation would be that the county council would read this bylaw for a first time.
Any discussion? You don't need to move right now, Steve.
I'll move so. First reading, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'll call the question then. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, of course, and I have to watch and I don't know where my phone is. Okay, let's move on to municipal services, page 40 to 43, and then it's the calcium stabilization hall program update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council. How's everyone doing this morning? All right, so this report is a fair amount of lengthy text, but I think for the benefit of the people watching and streaming our meeting, I'm going to go through the bulk of the body of the report, and then we can get into some discussion. So, following the completion of the Transportation Master Plan in 2010, the determination that something needed to be done with the county roads in order to keep up with the increased loading due to advancements in the technology in the agriculture industry, specifically intensive operations. It was determined that we had to keep our infrastructure in a sustainable state. The WSP was hired to complete a business case that studied different types of road surfaces and ultimately recommended that we go with the calcium-based stabilization for the gravel roads. Implementation of the calcium stabilization program began in 2014 with a test road project that studied various combinations of mixes and depths of mixing the calcium in, as well as we looked at our gradation of our gravel and determined that our PI was too low, we had to add bentonite. Through 2015 and 2016, County Council adopted the Funding Our Future initiative that made funds available to commence the program. At the onset of the program, the original haul routes that were identified in the WSP business case were used to select some of the highest priority roads in the county for the first phase. In 2016, 13 miles of new haul roads were created, mainly on 12-0, as well as we upgraded the test road with a topping that brought it up to full haul road status. At the end of 2017, 17 miles of roads were upgraded to full haul road status. Of note, at that time, prior to doing those 13 miles, the county did purchase the mill raiser so that we could do all of this work in-house. The 2016 construction program was a huge success. All conditions basically favorable during that construction season. And then we provided the data necessary for council to become confident in the product and the procedure being used. And although it was in its infancy, the product held up during a brutal winter and allowed a virtually ban-free spring season on those 17 miles. And all other gravel roads in the county were banned to 90% from April to mid-June that year. So those 17 miles, those producers that were on those roads got to see some big benefits from avoiding the ban season. These wins prompted municipal services to investigate the option of completing the remaining 117 miles of the originally identified haul routes through a 2-year program. The key points of the proposal that was made by municipal services was that all citizens, especially those impacted by the Funding Our Future initiative, would gain benefits at one time instead of waiting for a decade or more in some locations to receive their haul routes. It would limit the difficult task of prioritizing the haul routes and what order they would be completed in. So doing them all at once eliminated that prioritization. That the county would realize efficiencies of upgrades at one time, so they'd all be added into the budget over a 2-year period, and we'll get into talking about those efficiencies at the end of the report. Benefit of a lump sum gravel procurement and locking in pricing for the duration of the project. That was a key to allowing our supplier to do what they needed to do to be able to provide a consistent gravel throughout the 2-year project as well. So using the 2016 actual construction costs at the time, $110,000 per mile, administration recommended that the county borrow $13 million to fund the completion of the remaining 117 miles. A descriptive survey combined with open house meetings were then held in various locations of the county to get public input on the routes being identified for upgrade. This process yielded very little response and attendance. However, we did get a few good suggestions and valid arguments that prompted some changes to the routes. And administration was then advised by council that they were hearing from citizens that they may not be selecting the appropriate routes. Tours were set up for each councillor for their electoral division and to provide their input on the haul route selection process. Many of the discussions yielded reassurances that the original selections were the right choice. However, several changes were accepted due to the rationale provided during those tours. Prior to passing policy 351, the haul routes to be upgraded were identified as the original 17 miles and an additional 121 miles, which was an increase of 4 miles over the 117 that we had proposed to be done under the 13 million. Future consideration roads were also listed in the policy where merit showed that they met criteria for being upgraded, but they were not an option for the first phase of the program. It was identified that in the policy that both the haul routes and future consideration lists could be modified from time to time as authorized by council, which is the following report to this one, which we'll be talking about after we get through this report. During the selection process, the key factors in selecting the roads were traffic volumes based on our in-house counts, proximity to load origin or destination, meaning how close they are or far away from an intensive agriculture operation, current maintenance efforts, When we talk about current maintenance efforts, in that 2010 master plan, they identified all the roads in the county and how many times their gravel, how much gravel they received over a certain period of time, how many times the graders go there every year. We budget based on averages, so we average 4 visits to every road in the county per year. Some roads only get 1 or 2 visits because they don't need it, they only have very light traffic, and it's not necessary to send a grader there more than once every 6 months. Some are very intensive, especially around the intensive ag operations. We had several of these haul routes were in the 14 to 17 visits per year, which is 3 to 4 times the average. We had some that were up in the high 20s, and we definitely added those in to upgrade them so we didn't have to send a grader there twice a month or 3 times a month to keep it operational. Outside of the proven benefits to the county and citizens, the business case presented several areas in our public works budget that would gain major efficiencies from upgraded roadways, and financial gain from those efficiencies would greatly exceed the maintenance efforts needed to maintain the calcium roads. At the time, we were a little better than 900,000, nearing $1 million in savings versus the efficiencies versus what the cost of maintaining the gravel roads would be. These efficiencies have all been realized and implemented into the current budgets. Through the 2017 construction phase of the program, especially August and early September, the county saw some extremely dry drought conditions that caused many problems with the process of stabilizing the roadways. Low moisture content in the gravel and extremely low relative humidity caused segregation and dusting and overall poor surface immediately following the process. These challenges forced the county to review the mix design, water content, bentonite addition, gradation, and overall methodology, and we finished the project in 2017 with 41 miles complete.
Boss has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I would have would be, with the efficiencies that you were talking about, was the investment included in that too?
No.
Yes, ma'am, what do you mean with investment?
So
The money that we had aboard and over, that we included that in there with the savings that we had.
Once we get into the
About,
spreadsheet, we can talk about that and the difference between construction and the overall program. Because building it is a different animal than maintaining it for the next 50 years, right? So several repairs required on the completed miles in 2017 to bring them up to proper standard. And further to repairs, the watering program far exceeded the budgeted amount and added to the deficit in the maintenance budget for the miles that had been completed. Late in 2017 and early in 2018, further analysis was done on the gravel recipe, and the determination was made that our original assumptions were correct, and we maintained the original mix design. So when we shut down early in September last year with 41 miles, our target was 60. We did some testing and digging around trying to find a different clay source to supplement the bentonite, come up with a different gradation for our gravel, and all of that yielded that we had made the best choice to begin with based on the availability of appropriate clay in the area. There is clay, but drying it and all those kind of things would be far too costly, and the bentonite was a better choice. And the gradation of our gravel is the animal that we have in this region, and we do have a sandy gravel, and that's just what we have to live with, but it is still the best choice. Through experience and modifications to methodology in 2018, again, we got back to great success as the remaining 80 miles of the 138 miles total were completed. And although it was again an extremely dry summer season, the problems associated with the lack of moisture were mitigated, and we encountered very little setbacks and repairs required in the miles that we completed this year. Having the additional 20 miles to complete from the shortfall in 2017 caused the push to be on to finish the full program in 2018. And some of the areas that required repairs or maintenance were put off until appropriate time in the schedule that the crew could complete the repairs. So I think that's why we got a few of the complaints that we did, is because that crew was focused on getting the project finished. We're not gonna have that push in the coming years, whether we do a few new miles or not. The repair crew is set up to do repairs, and they'll be done in a timely manner. So the repairs, moving forward, there are maintenance and repairs that must be completed annually on these roads. They're not maintenance free. They do require a little bit more maintenance than asphalt roads. So this involves grading or mill raising, a small addition of calcium and repacking. This is only done in spot areas that we have identified: potholing, rutting, washboarding, graveling, etc. The rest of the calcium road should only require water during extended periods of dry weather, and possibly a light surface grading where deterioration is at a minimum. There's also a 6-year maintenance cycle. The funds are being collected and reserved to allow for a 1/2 inch of modified gravel, bentonite, and 1/2 reapplication of calcium on all miles. So that's being put into a reserve every year, and as the roads reach that point in their life cycle, they do need the addition of calcium, the re-addition of calcium, and we're anticipating a 1/2 inch gravel loss over 6 years. We don't see gravel loss right now in any of the roads, but we had incorporated that in just to make sure that we do have the ability to fund it if we are getting gravel loss on those roads. And again, due to the infancy of the program, limited experience with the product and our climate and local hauling conditions, we have little data to make assumptions on, and the program will be modified as needed to sustain the level of service on the haul roads. Devin and I, with Ross from WSP, did do a tour of 3 municipalities in Montana and Wyoming that use this product and have used it for the last 25 to 30 years. It was a very painful tour down there. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. They don't track their data. They don't have, they learned more from us than we learned from them down there. But this, we call our program in its infancy, or maybe in its rookie stage right now. We've gone from infancy to rookie. Getting into the sophomore stage will be a little bit of testing and trying different things. But we're still very confident in the program. It is not a new product. The American government has been using it for the last 50 years, especially on their missile roads. So we're just figuring how it fits into our climate, into our type of gravel, into our humidity levels and all those kind of things. And then from what administration is hearing from the public, the citizens are extremely happy with the program, and we have received requests to expand the program in the future. It is important at this juncture to stay the course and make informed decisions as we progress into the future by either adding to the network of haul routes, modifying maintenance efforts, implementing bylaws, or investigating other initiatives to keep our roads in a sustainable state. The haul route program is being incorporated into our asset management program and is classified as gravel-based stabilized roads with a service level of haul route. Okay, so when we're identifying service levels on particular roads, it will identify maintenance efforts, life cycle analysis, and all of those things that are associated with the asset management program that Mike will be talking about you further in a report coming out this afternoon. So the financial implications, we lost our clock. Okay, so we may get through this or not, but you'll notice when Municipal Services first presented its business case to do all of the roads at once and identify efficiencies to be gained, the left-hand side of that page is virtually a cut and paste from that report. It shows exactly what we had forecast for efficiencies and then the costs. So just right at the very top, you did ask about having the dollars in there for the construction. They're shown on the spreadsheet, but they're not tallied in the calculations as you go down the spreadsheet. Where it starts is under efficiencies. Gravel savings for haul roads, we cut about 1/3 of our gravel use per year based on the gravel that is not going onto the haul roads now. We identified those 138 miles were eating up about 1/3 of our gravel every year. And that's the data that we had, and that's what we've cut the budget by. So those roads will not be receiving gravel under the graveling program. They'll receive gravel like I talked about before. If we do start seeing gravel loss, it's that 6-year half-inch thing in the reserves that we have identified on the bottom. Additional maintenance for haul routes, that was a separate line item in the budget. In our budget that we removed completely, so it's virtually a wash on what the savings were. That item just came up because we're not doing that maintenance on that program. Now reconditioning and reconstruction, that generated a lot of discussion between ourselves and finance and how those savings are realized. Those are actually grant program, or part of reconditioning was a grant program. So we had to reduce the operating portion, which didn't take into account all of the savings because part of it was grant funded. So we reduced the whole in-house funded portion of reconditioning to 0, and that was $406,000. And then the other $130,000 was grant funded. So we had to reduce the revenue side. So it's not fully realized in the operating budget, but it shows up in the bottom as available grant dollars for the next 100 years to come, that we don't have to do that reconditioning under a grant. And same with reconstruction. Reconstruction, a lot of the roads we had identified over the next several decades were roads that were haul routes that would have otherwise had to be reconstructed by that point in time. So we reduced the number. In this program, it says $250,000, which is about, we said one road will not be done every 4 years. We budget typically $1 million a year for reconstruction, which is all grant funded dollars. In the 5-year capital budget, you'll notice we reduced that even further to one road every 2 years. So, but we didn't identify it here because potentially a road will come up that needs to be reconstructed, and we don't want to overestimate the efficiency because it's only showing up as grant dollars and not dollars that we have to raise taxes to pay for. General grading, this one we did not see as much of a gain as we had projected. A lot of that shows up in the annual increases in wages and the equipment rates, fuel costs. So we didn't forecast those increases in that general grading line because it's not savings of material, it's not savings of contractor pricing, it's savings of in-house, which the prices did go up by COLA, it went up by the increases in wages, and we did see some fuel increases in those line items. Dust control, so this is a big one. We actually lowered the number of subscribers by 74 total subscriptions to the dust control program, which is 50/50 funded. And then one thing that we forgot, between Devin and I doing the numbers, is that our in-house dust control program, a big portion of that was on roads that were being upgraded to haul road status that does need to be done. So there was an additional $152,000 in the dust control line that was specifically identified to roads that got calcium put on them as part of the stabilization program. So we gained $152,000 in our dust control over and above what we had originally estimated. And then we get into the expense side and what it takes to maintain those roads. The $560,000 is a direct transfer to reserves to pay for that 6-year maintenance item that I talked about, the half-inch gravel and the re-addition of calcium to those roads, because we know calcium has a shelf life as it gets used or reacts with water. It does lower its ability to perform, and we do have to re-add calcium. And the one here that we underestimated on was the maintenance per mile. We had it at $2,000 per mile in 2016. What we realized over the last couple of years is that maintenance is a little bit more intensive in the onset, and we bumped that up to $3,000 a mile. A lot of that is because of the dry weather and the amount of watering that we have to do. So we didn't anticipate the amount of watering during the dry season. So there is a little bit more maintenance if the weather remains dry, which according to my sources is we've got a few more dry years to come, so we're keeping that level at what we had seen in the years that we've just gone through. So when you get down to the bottom, although it is confusing, we have actually seen efficiencies at $74,000 greater than what we had originally projected. The only difference is that they don't show up 100% in operating. There's that $380,000 that shows up in available grant dollars that is either available MSI or FGTF that will come up in capital budgets, and when we discuss our 5-year capital plan, how we're going to fund that $380,000 comes in very handy for other projects like the Shaughnessy project, or maybe more haul roads, because that in our budget deliberation we'll be talking about that. That's my report, and I know we're probably out of time, so.
I don't know if we would have time for questions right now because we leave at 10:30. So if we could have somebody table this. Call for the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. So right now we'll move up to pages 8 to 12, and we have again the appointment with bylaw 1404. Hillary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to introduce the item, and then Mr. Freno and his consultants are here to speak to their request, but I'll just go through some of the background and information, and then if there's any questions of council once we've gone through the request, I will be able to answer those. So we've received, the landowner, Mr. Rob Freno, has submitted a letter requesting that County Council consider waiving the 18-month time frame from which an application, the same application, may be brought forward to County Council. As you may recall, County Council defeated bylaw 18-021, which was an amendment to the land use bylaw with the purpose of redesignating portions of lot 1 and 2, block 2, in plan 02-10532 from Lethbridge Urban Fringe to Group Country Residential, otherwise known as the amendment to this land use bylaw amendment for the Cooley View Area Structure Plan. In the county's land use bylaw, section 53, the policy states that where an application has been made and defeated, that the application may not be made again for another 18 months from the date of the defeat, unless council applies its discretion in accordance with the policies of the bylaw. So that second section, as you read in your report on page 8 there, council at its sole discretion may accept another application for an amendment to the land use bylaw that has been defeated if, in council's opinion, they have provided additional information or there's a change in circumstances that council can rehear the application. So with that, just as a context for moving forward, if the waiver is granted, the applicant would have to go through the amendment process again. By granting the waiver, that does not mean you're granting the previous bylaw. That's been defeated, that's done, so they would have to reapply and go through the process of the amendment again. So that would be going through another public hearing, and council would make a decision on the new bylaw that is coming forward. So just to make sure that that's clear for council. With that, I will let the Mr. Farino and his consultants come forward with regards to the letter that they have submitted, and I can come back for questions afterwards.
Any questions for Hillary before she leaves? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Muriel? Either one.
I'll just handle this up quick. Just a couple of aerial shots. So I appreciate having this time with you today. We're requesting the council permit us to make an early reapplication for the land use redesignation for Coolview Estates. We were quite surprised that our redesignation request was not approved after the public hearing. We have an area structure plan that has been approved by council after that public hearing and after many months of work between the consultants and county administration. The couple aerials I've given you just kind of show the proximity of our coulee and the land to the river and adjacent land. We did not think that the issue of the coulee sloughing would come up at the land use hearing because it has been covered and approved in the ASP, together with the slope stability report by Tetra Tech. Had we known this was to be discussed, we would have been properly prepared and would have had Mark Sabrin of Tetra Tech at the hearing. Mark is here today to answer any questions, and if approved, will be at the public hearing for the land use change. I'm hoping that we will get approval to resubmit the land use application, and council will provide me with any specific questions that you may have with respect to the land use redesignation. We thought the questions raised by Mr. Boychuk in the last hearing were all answered previously. Coulee stability, fencing, signs, stormwater issues, and other concerns raised by Mr. Boychuk have already been addressed either in the ASP or at the public hearing for the ASP on June 7th. I'll respond briefly to some of those concerns that were raised by Mr. Boychuk, and Mark Sabrin will respond in more detail with respect to the slope stability. The storm size pond, the storm pond size. Martin Geomatic Consultants completed a stormwater management plan for the development, which was submitted with the ASP. Martin Geomatics will complete the detailed design of the stormwater pond and storm drainage system and provide it for county approval, and will submit the design to Alberta Environment as per the Water Act for approval. It's really important to know that the pond will store a 1 in 100-year storm. It allows for 1 in a 100-year storm event. And it will actually result in less flow down the coulee than there is currently. So it'll be an improvement, and it'll provide additional relief for any localized sloughing that may occur. B, the fencing along the coulee. We will either have the individual lot owner build the fence through the architectural controls, or it will be constructed by the developer, which is us. But a common fence will be built. Trespassing, adequate signage will be installed. The garbage issue, the developer, which is us, will be responsible for keeping the site clean during construction until the final acceptance by the county. And again, I will be the point of contact for any issues that any of the neighbors have. The neighborhood association, it will be created with all lot owners as members. They'll be responsible for management of the potable water and irrigation water systems. They will also be available to discuss concerns that may arise with the other neighbors and with the county. And last was coulee ownership. There was a concern there. Coulee will become part of my dad's lot, number 18, and so it will be his responsibility. So with respect to the slope stability issue, I'll let Mark speak a little bit. If you have any questions regarding the sloughing, I think Mark is definitely the man for that, and then I'll just have a short closing statement.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to come here and speak. So I'm not privy to any of concerns or issues regarding slope stability that have been addressed by at the public hearing, as I wasn't there. Tetra Tech, I think as you're all aware through the ASP, if you were involved in that process, did a complete geotechnical evaluation, including a slope stability assessment. The process for doing that is the same we've been doing it for many, many decades, and in all jurisdictions in southern Alberta as well as other areas of Alberta. So the process typically is we look at the soils, we do a slope stability assessment, and we create a setback line where the development has to be built beyond that. And it leaves a certain space between what we call the top of bank, which is just where the coulee starts, and where they can build their home or any other, which is based on your bylaw. In the city of Lethbridge, for instance, it becomes their back property line. Counties and or municipal districts sometimes have different rules that they can still own below it. However, that's where the house would be and or utilities and things like that. So when we do it, we do an analysis and drill holes and find where the groundwater table is. And as we do our analysis, we arbitrarily raise the groundwater level because we know in the future, typically subdivisions increase the soil moisture content because there's less evapotranspiration, because things are covered by houses, roads, things like that where the sun can't draw the water out of the ground. So we automatically do that and we create what we determine as a development setback line. So that was done for this property. By doing an analysis, that would obviously make sense that we don't stop coulees from sloughing in the future. They'll do whatever they'll do. But on this particular property, because the lands around it were irrigated, the current perched water table, which is very small, it's somewhere between 4 to 6 meters down, it's already been created by the irrigation that went there. So the coulee slopes in this particular development have already seen an increase in soil moisture. However, in our slope stability analysis, we arbitrarily increased that within a meter of the ground level, and then we ran our analysis to see where the slopes would fail and make an appropriate development setback line for that severe case. So the residences themselves, or the lot owners that will own these, they're protected. They're protected in the fact that if something untoward happened and there was a stability that impacted their property, then they would come after Tetra Tech. We carry liability insurance, and it's very typical. They would come after the consultant and said, you can build here. So that the county and or municipal district or city or municipal jurisdiction, they have no responsibility, typically, although you do provide some approval. But there should be no case. In the event there is a slough, that there could be, there have been sloughs in this coulee over the last 500 years or more. And they're prevalent on this one. You can see them in the southeast or southwest corner. They're relatively shallow. They're probably a half a meter or a meter deep. They're kind of small in lateral extent, but they're there. Because we see them, and when we do our site reconnaissance and we look at all that, we say, well, this coulee has been subject to slough and instabilities in the past, and then we model why did that happen, and that was done in this case. So again, that's all taken into the analysis. It's all within our report that we submitted with the ASP. So if there is a slough in the future, it will not impact the residential lots, and there will be a slough within the coulee that's owned by the Freedoms. How that may be detrimental to the area, I don't know. I'd be happy to, if one of the council members has a question on that, I'd be happy to see if I could answer it. But it's pretty typical. It's on every coulee, every valley wall. This particular area of Lethbridge in the county has had some major historic valley wall landslides. You can see that by the valley walls that are adjacent to it that the coulees draw into, and they're all very historic. And I could maybe lend some reasoning on why they're there. Even the Boychuk slump that's right on their property, I actually walked up that slide 15 minutes after it happened on behalf of the city of Lethbridge back in the day. So maybe I'll just leave that for now. I don't understand the concerns. I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have, and I would be prepared, as Mr. Farino has said, to attend the next public hearing and address any concerns that the public may have.
Thank you. Does council have any questions? Okay, I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Before we close, so, I mean, the goal of this is just to hopefully get the public hearing redone before the 18 months. Obviously, we feel that all the information was already provided, but like Mark said, he can be here for that public hearing and put everyone's mind at ease. I think we can do that. I'm confident of that. So I think in closing, all of the studies that we provided, which are the slope stability study, septic disposal field feasibility assessment, phase 1 environmental site assessment, historical resources application and assessment, stormwater management plan, technical evaluation, and the area structure plan. All of these studies prove there's no engineering, scientific, or safety reason why the development should not proceed. So I hope you'll let us have a public hearing.
Thank you. Any questions? I do have one. Have you looked at any options on kind of like Sunset Acres has in their development where they have zero scape or things like that?
Yeah. So I spent about an hour with a landscaper discussing xeriscape, discussing the irrigation system. So we talked about that in the area structure plan a little bit, and we'll probably go to whatever's gonna benefit the subdivision. There are some drawbacks to xeriscape that they don't have a root system, but I'm still looking into more detail on what's gonna be the best way to go.
Mr. Chairman, just, sorry to interrupt, I think I can add to that question. So, zero landscaping from a geotechnical perspective, it hasn't really been looked at for the last 3 or 4 decades. Prior to that, anywhere near a slope, Edmonton, Calgary, Cardston, you've heard of all these issues that there have been drawn up. And it was looked upon that development adjacent to the slope was the cause for the slope instability. That's not true. The University of Lethbridge has done studies over the last 30 years, and it's the entire development. So it goes back blocks and blocks past the slope edge that all of that water is caused. All groundwater follows the topography of the surface, so it's all lending to go towards the river. So the irrigation on the adjacent farmers' lands, that water is going towards his coulee where the drainage shows up from a topographical perspective of the contours. So to do that, we've looked at it upon, or the engineering community, to say how can we limit a landowner doing what he wants to do on land, especially when in future years he may sell. And whether or not somebody looks at the caveat on his property and then adheres to that, it just seemed, why are you limiting a landowner to doing what he wants on his property? So as I mentioned in my, when I was talking prior, that's why we elevate the groundwater and the soil moisture content, because we know it's gonna happen. So we do a study to say the groundwater is at this elevation and the soil moisture is at this percentage, and then we arbitrarily double it. We just increase it. We just say, well, what's the worst that could happen over the next 30, 40, 50 years? Because our studies are good, typically in engineering terms, it's an 80-year life. So we've done all of that. You can do it. How much does it help? It would be less, way less than 5%. It might be in the 1 or 2%, perhaps. But it's not something that's going to do it. you know, we do stuff now, if somebody wants to put a swimming pool in their back, that was always a no-no. Well, then now there's, you just say, do a double containment system to stop a lot of the leaks from happening. But other than that, we allow underground irrigation, drip irrigation on trees, do all of that, because it's not gonna impact where the setback line is.
Another thing, when I talked to the landscaper, was in some of these subdivisions, they requested that the landowners put a deposit down on their irrigation system if they're gonna put something in. There's different types of sprinkler types that can really limit some of that extra water or wasted water, maybe you want to call it that. I'm looking into all that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got two questions, and the first one is, I didn't quite get it there. You took core samples down there. How far down did you go again?
I don't have my report in front, I believe we drilled 9.1 and 12.1 meters. I think we had 7 different boreholes, but the maximum, I believe, was 12 meters. It might have been 9. I don't have my report directly in front of me.
Okay. And then the other one is, you put some emphasis on, you know, the liability end of it down there. It's basically the engineering firm, if they basically give the go-ahead or see the ability to have that type of a development down there, it's the engineering firm what basically going to be liable if something did happen.
That's correct. Yeah, our firm would be responsible on any slope stability issue and or if there's a geotechnical issue, because we did that engineering as well. That's correct.
Klaus?
And if I understood that correctly, the above water that is put toward the soil and everything is not the cost for the dirt moving? Is that the way you explained it?
Well, any precipitation or surface water infiltrates the ground depending on the speed and the slope. So when it rains, so in the last almost 30 years, although we get the same amount of precipitation per year, we actually have more rain days. So Lethbridge is not the sun capital anymore. Medicine Hat is. We were before because our rain events were a little more significant. When it rained, you'd get 100 millimeters, say, in a storm event. Now we would get like 75, but you get the same amount of rain per year. So you just get more of them. So they're slower. So I think you've all seen some severe rain events that we've had. It's almost like the water bounces off the streets, bounces off your lawn, and it just goes into the storm system and it's gone. If you get what we all like to have for our grass, you get those really nice slow drip days, the last 4 days or something like that. So that is an example of how that water, it actually goes into the soil. So the soil can absorb it, but when it's an extreme event, it almost bounces away onto the streets, right? It gets taken away by your storm system. In this case, it'll be taken away by the storm one, which is the 100-year event. So all water around does it. When you have roofs and roads and things like that, the sun can't get it. So when it rains, it's still raining the same amount on that entire footprint, but now that water is either going into the roads, if it's gravel or all that, it eventually goes to ditches and gets into the ground. But the sun can't get at it very fast because there's something that's stopping the sun from getting at it. So you increase the soil moisture content. So we take all of that into account in our analysis, which is what Mr. Hagan has mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Yes, thank you, sir. Now, is it sandy soil or what kind of soil is it?
There's, well, it's topsoil.
Yeah.
Engineers don't like topsoil, but I'm sure this is a farming community. I'll be in trouble. There's about 3 meters of lacustrine, so that's like a river deposit or a windblown deposit over top of a glacial till. Lethbridge has had 3 glaciers in its history. So the glacier till is around a little over 3 meters down. So it's almost impermeable. So that's why you get groundwater tables set upon the till and it's within the lacustrine. The makeup of the material is, give or take, it's 40% sand, 40% silt, and 20% clay. Our glacial deposit is the same. It's just that the glacial deposit has been weathered over the last million years and it becomes a surficial soil. So I don't know if I've explained that properly, but yeah, we don't, in the Lethbridge area, we have what's referred as the Lindsay Silts deposit. I've included it in the analysis for Farino homes, although in that end, as you kind of start going away from Lethbridge, you don't have the Lindsay, that deposit wasn't created. But all of that being said, we don't have any high plastic layers or anything like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Buzz?
Well, then I'll move that the county council approve requested waiver of section 53 of the land use bylaw, and also waiver of the application fees for the new bylaw use amendment.
Okay. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if that's the motion, what are the real changes that we have heard here, besides just going through the same process over again?
Basically, we're just agreeing to let them proceed and hear the rest of, for second and third reading. No. Is that correct, Hillary? There is no actual difference to the,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to Councillor Campbell. So I guess from Mr. Farino's request today, it's a clarification of the information that was provided through the area structure plan. So that wasn't provided in the public hearing that was held for the land use bylaw amendment. So that would be the additional information that council can consider. But it was provided through the area structure plan when it was approved. So not necessarily new information, just a clarification and reinforcement of existing information.
any further questions? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think council just needs to decide what they want to see here. It was a little over a year ago that a lumber yard was approved for an adjacent property. So in my opinion, they don't coexist. There's always going to be noise issues when you're across the fence. So do you want commercial here, or do you want residential? In my opinion, it's one or the other.
So actually, the commercial property is not part of this development. It's separated by how much?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the application that was for the lumber yard, just as Councilor Campbell said, about a year and a half ago, was for the front half of the property facing onto Highway 25, which is about 10 acres. And so the residential side is the area behind it. So yes, the lumber yard is not part of the application that we heard back in October.
Okay, is that a good enough answer for you, Steve? Or kind of what you were looking for?
Well, that's more or less what I said.
Yeah. Any other questions? Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the way I would look at it is that every meeting that we come to, virtually every meeting, we're given something like this. We're given area structure plans. We have applications all the time for group country residential. Here we have a industrial park. These applications are constantly coming before us. And just to speak for myself, every time there's a new application that comes before me, I have to look at it through the lens of what I think is best for the county. And that then has to influence my decision on how I vote on a particular issue. I'm influenced by the information that's presented to me in these area structure plans, by the experts that come and speak to us, and also by residents that reach out to us and air their concerns. So I'd like to think that I'm making the best educated decision that I can. And through this process, I have not questioned the engineering, and maybe to my fault, I haven't spoke up to this point. My concern has always been with the fit in the county and how development works, or doesn't work, sorry, how we as a council approach development for the long-term strategy and the long-term success of the county. My feeling is that during the last time you were before us, I think it did go off the rails a little bit just because we got off of what the real question was. We had a landowner that presented some pictures and some facts that they felt to be true. So for that reason, I would be in support of approving the request. If you if there is a want among council to hear this again, just so that we're all on the same page, the right information is provided, the right questions are asked at the right time, I would support this as it sits right now. That being said, I have voted consistently to this point, and I will continue to vote consistently. That would be my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Got any closing comments? Okay, thank you. I'm going to call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we have 11 o'clock public hearings. It's 11:00.
7:04.
Yeah. I can sort of see it. Okay. So we have 11 o'clock public hearing scheduled for bylaw 18-012 Chinook Industrial Park area. So we would need a motion to open the public hearing. Morris? I'll call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to pull up the map for everybody to see the location of the proposed area structure plan.
Sorry, I should have said page 13 to 30. And you have your copy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. As mentioned, this is a public hearing for bylaw 18-012, the Chinook Industrial Area Structure Plan. The Chinook Industrial Area Structure Plan has been, the application was made by Hasegawa Consulting Professional Engineers on behalf of the current landowners for the Chinook Industrial Park Area Structure Plan. So that includes the parcel currently occupied by Southland International Kirkland Holdings, and also the numbered company to the north for the larger titled area, and also includes the county-owned stormwater management facility, which is in the east corner of the area structure plan. So this proposal is directly east of the 43rd Street, which is adjacent to the city of Lethbridge, and is north of the existing Rave Industrial Park. The proposed area structure plan conforms to the policies of the County Municipal Development Plan, as well as the City of Lethbridge and Lethbridge County Intermunicipal Development Plan. In addition, the lands proposed in the area structure plan have been identified in the county's industrial commercial land use strategy as an area for future industrial and commercial growth. The proposed uses are compatible with the adjacent lands. As mentioned before, they are just directly north of an existing industrial park, which would be the Rave Industrial Park. And also to the west is the City of Lethbridge Industrial Area, so there is no conflict in terms of use. In reviewing the servicing options, the plan identifies tying into the city's sewer system for phase 1 of the development on a temporary basis, consistent with what the Rave Industrial Park, or a good portion of the Rave Industrial Park, has today. Future phases would have to look at alternative sewer treatment, including the possibility of a regional sewer system, as has been discussed by the Municipal Services Department in the past. Potable water will come from the city, and discussions with the city indicate that there is adequate potable water supply for the future development in this area. County administration will work with the city on amending or creating new servicing agreements for this area with regards to both potable water and sewer services. A traffic impact assessment was completed and provides details on the upgrades that will be required to the roads and intersections, such as traffic lights. Prior to any development occurring, county administration will have to identify the method to collect funds to ensure that the road and intersection upgrades and improvements are appropriately funded. And this would be done in collaboration with the City of Lethbridge also, because it is 43rd Street is their roadway. A stormwater management plan was completed for the area structure plan and identifies the required facilities for the entire development. The stormwater management plan will utilize and expand on the existing stormwater pond, which is the county-owned pond in the southeast corner, within the ASP, and will also have a new one to the north and pond future phases. The application has been circulated to the other county departments, the City of Lethbridge, and external agencies for their review. Comments were received from the City of Lethbridge, Alberta Transportation, Fortis, ATCO, and the Old Man River Regional Services Commission. Fortis, ATCO, and Alberta Transportation expressed no concerns with regards to the proposed area structure plan. The City of Lethbridge had requested several amendments to the proposed plan in their original comments made in May of this year. The amendments were completed and accepted by the city. Additional comments were made to the cities, by the city in their final comments made in October of this year, and were also incorporated into the final plan. They were fairly minor in nature. The Old Man River Regional Services Commission provided comments in support of the proposed area structure plan as it complies with the municipal development plan and the intermunicipal development plan between the city and the county. Notices of the public hearing were advertised in the October 23rd and 30th editions of the Sunny South News and also sent to the affected landowners. After writing this report and having it submitted, I did receive a couple of phone calls just more asking when the public hearing was going to be held. There was no concerns expressed through those comments. So with that, administration would recommend that this bylaw be read a second and a third time as drafted. And I know that the applicants are here to speak towards it if council chooses.
Any questions from council? Guess not. Thanks, Ellery. So is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the bylaw? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? And anyone asking to speak in opposition? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor?
They've heard me before.
Anyone wishing to speak in favor? And last call, anyone wishing to speak plain old speak? Seeing no one, does council have any questions, concerns? Do you have anything to close with?
I will mention that, I guess just in closing, that we have, as you can tell by this document, a lot of time and effort has been put on it on behalf of the applicant, Haskell Engineering, and the county to ensure that this document fulfills the strategic goals of the county in terms of getting more industrial commercial areas online. We've been working at this for, I would say, longer for probably the landowners, but in terms of this document itself, probably 2 years in the making. So it's, I feel it's a really good guiding document. There's a lot of work that has to be done moving forward if council chooses to approve this document, but this sets a good framework for moving forward and developing this area in an efficient manner. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, it's certainly a lot smoother than the last time around. So, yes. Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Council, just to kind of reiterate something that Hillary mentioned, I think this example, this bylaw, this area structure plan in front of you is an example, and as I wrote my report, where this application proposal, if you look at Council's strategic plans and policy frameworks that you have adopted, that this proposal meets your municipal development plan in regards to industrial land use. It meets some of the policies that are outlined in the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan about the efficient use and servicing the land. It meets with your Lethbridge County Industrial Commercial Land Use Strategy that we prepared on your behalf. This area of land was identified as a growth node industrial area as suitable for the county. And as well, I think the big one is that it aligns with and complies with the intermunicipal development plan with the city of Lethbridge. As some of you recall, this land area here and was almost what started our discussions with the city 5 or 6 years ago on the intermunicipal development plan. That was a long 5-year process with many meetings with the city to get that plan in place. But at the end of the day, I think you see the results of that in that, as Hilary mentioned, in some of their draft, there was some consultation with the city, and some of the areas looked at and revised accordingly. But in the end, you have a letter from the city, does not object to the proposal, they're supportive of it, and can work with the county in looking at this area for some possible future servicing option. So the proposal itself in this area does conform with the policies in the intermunicipal development plan of the city. So on those 4 major policy documents, it seems to tick all the boxes. So I think that's something that's positive in looking at making a decision on this proposal as regards as the policy frameworks that council looks at.
Thank you, Steve. Final call for questions. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Morris? Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Again, for second reading. Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. And third reading. Bonds. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get a motion to lift from the table the Kelsey stabilization report. Get back to that one. Steve? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And that was pages 40 to 43.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to be back. So, quick review, we just went through the background and how we got to where we are today. Municipal Services is excited to move into the next years where we're beyond the main construction phase and into how this program is going to benefit the county for decades to come. With that, we're ready for any discussion, questions that you might have of the efficiencies. I'm not requesting for any decision to be made today. This is just an update on where we're at with the program.
So Rick, when will you have kind of the final numbers for the completion of the project?
Hopefully tomorrow. In finishing the last couple of miles, we just want to ensure that all invoicing is in from any rentals, the gravel supply, any of our suppliers, and just to make sure that the number that we bring forward in that report is the final number. And I've been told by finance and from tech services that those numbers will be in. We were hoping for this meeting, but in talking with Ann, we had to delay it just because of that length of time that happened between us doing the work for Alberta Transportation and then having to finish up our last few miles didn't allow for invoicing to be in and separating those pricings.
And my other question would be, have we had any opportunity to do some mill raising or replaning in some of the troubled sections of the roads? And will you have a better idea on what those costs will be for the next meeting?
Yeah, what happened was the area we were in to do the work for Alberta Transportation, which was 843 north of the city. In that area was an area where we had the bulk of our issues from the miles that were done in 2017. And because we were in that area, we had delayed the mobilization to back north of the river, and we completed a bunch of those repairs areas that we had heard from residents that they were concerned about the potholing, and those repairs were done. As far as I know, there are no major repairs left on the list. They'll be carried over to next year as of right now. There's probably the odd pothole here and there that needs to be fixed. We're looking at options on how we're gonna do those, where it's not worthwhile bringing a whole bunch of equipment out, but how we're gonna repair those potholes. And we think just having a bucket full of modified aggregate and a little bit of calcium and dropping it in the hole and packing it, we just have to scarify the surface with maybe a lining bar or something. But we're looking at those options now.
Morris?
Yeah, should I use this mic or?
Yes, please, please.
Only if you wanna talk.
Is it working? There we go. Yeah, you know, like, I think the biggest problem is, you know, the understanding of the haul roads with the regular people, with the public, and even some of the businesses will really benefit from it, you know, and I wonder, you know, how we can get that across a lot better to the people what the objective is. The objective is, you know, like you mentioned it earlier already, you know, like there's practically no road ban on it, you know, and hopefully that's where we can stay away from. And the other one is, you know, I try to tell the people, you know, the objective is, hey, to have a better system in place for the businesses we have, and you know all what the businesses in our county are. And how we get that across, I'm not sure, because I'm still, you know, I get some good comments, but I'm still being bombarded by, what the heck are you guys doing? You know, like, we need to come up with a good explanation on that end of it. Right?
So there is the business aspect, which is all of these numbers and things that, how we gain efficiencies and how we minimize the road maintenance budget. And then there's the other part that Lauren touches on in the video, and we went through in the whole Funding Our Future stuff is road safety. And I mean, we've got these roads that are major arteries for an agriculture industry that gets the products to market and also helps them function as a intensive agriculture operations. The safety part is we have a lot of residents in the county that put their kids on school buses and pile their families into SUVs, and they drive on these roads and eliminating the dust and all sorts of other benefits. I think we can probably generate some PSAs that go out and just talk about things like that. If we do see a reduction in accidents on these roads, and we had several this year from dust because of the dry weather. I don't recall any of those accidents happening on haul roads. They were more on gravel roads that they were hauling on, and massive amounts of dust and people running into the back of trailers and things like that. So that safety part is a big thing. And the benefit to the industry is a big one. No road ban or lack of road bans. I still will not recommend that we take off the road bans completely, because we do want to do an assessment of those roads annually and make sure that they can stand up to the traffic during the year when most roads cannot. We talk about the benefits. Last year, we're in a flood season, and not having to go out and keep those roads passable allowed our crews and equipment to be deployed to other areas. And you see historical pictures of people dragging their B trains up or through a road because it's impassable, and several times over and over, and it takes a couple hours to go a mile for some of these loaded trucks. We didn't see any of that during the flood season, where the pictures coming in from all the municipalities around us had all of that going on. And not only did we keep 90% ban on our regular gravel roads, we had no bans, virtually no bans on the haul roads, and everywhere around us banned all of their gravel roads to 75%. So our efforts, the reconditioning efforts, are huge, because we were shedding the water, creating that crown, doing all of those efforts on our roads are big benefits to our producers. And the safety factor is, I think we've got a very safe road network, especially compared to some of our neighbors.
Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the completion of our 138 miles that we did, what are we looking for in the future? Because in my opinion, we did miss some, and I know that past councillors have pointed to the roads that they thought it was necessary to be done. In the future, are we going to be looking at doing some more here, if the budget allows, without having to borrow any excess money?
Yeah, in response to Councillor Vanderveen's question, in the next 5 years, we have identified the fact that municipal services feels the same way, that more roads should be added to the network. Through the whole process, we did tell the producers when we were going through the Funding Our Future that the bulk of the network would be done as part of the initial program, and then we would look at other roads that would provide efficiencies, would provide maybe access from their operation to a road, like shorter sections of roadway. We talked about things like doing 100 to 300 meter stretches where we're leading into approaches on the highways on roads that are not done, because that's where we see a lot of washboarding from Excel and Decel. There's a lot of that. The discussions were during those tours and creating the future consideration roads. We have 30 miles listed as future consideration, and we're looking at adding to that list. We have some roads that come in from our public works staff that say, hey, this road should be done. We're out there every day, or those kind of things. We had some that came in from council this year, and we also had one that was brought in by a resident that once we looked at it, hey, this makes a lot of sense. So we run it through the gamut of does it meet the criteria? How is it brought forward? What kind of efficiencies are we going to add to the efficiencies list by doing this? How much more is it going to increase the maintenance? All those kind of things that we run it through. And the idea was that we would be able to modify the future consideration list from time to time. And that means that we would probably bring forward prior to budget if there's any additions to the future consideration list. And then when we're prioritizing on that future considerations list, we're going through all of those criteria of the ones that are identified or approved by council to be on that consideration list. And then we bring it forward during budget deliberations, which is what you're going to hear about in the next report, as well as going forward into budget deliberations. We're coming forward under capital, MSI funded, to do this year an additional 10 miles, and in future years 5 miles a year until we're caught up on the ones that we think we should be doing under the future consideration list. And that's going to be up to council to approve. You guys may say, well, there's a little bit of MSI extra, we want to spend that on 15 miles. But that's up to, we're recommending from municipal services that 10 miles get done this year. And a big part of that is because of what's happening at Cavendish and Range Road 94. Does that answer your question?
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard some recent positive comments on the road that was redone east of the city to more or less to alleviate the potholes and everything. My question was, on your 6-year maintenance cycle, do you see the 6 years sort of as an average? Like some roads might need to be done after 4 years, some 8 years, just depending on their, I guess, their use.
Yeah, so some of the discussions we've been having with, and this was Steve Monlux, you guys all have met him, or if you haven't, you've seen him on the video. He's a gravel guru that has been around the American gravel industry for, I think he's been there for 45 or 50 years. So a lot of that came from discussions with him on that 6 years and how long the calcium's gonna last. In looking at our gradation and our PI issues, we may lose calcium earlier than we had expected, but our gravel retention is higher than we expected. So we think that when we do our repairs, we were never anticipating that top shot of calcium in those areas, but adding that top shot in those areas is essentially rejuvenating the calcium content in the areas that we're having problems. So we think what's gonna happen is we're gonna be spending a little bit more on little bits of calcium addition, and that gravel portion will be pushed out to a longer period, maybe 8 or 10 years. So if we can keep that calcium going, we may not have to do that ½ inch of gravel, because on those roads that are 2 and 3 years old, we're not seeing the gravel loss that we were expecting, if that makes sense. So again, we're in our infancy, and we're trying to track the data so that we can understand how that money is gonna be invested. The reason it's $560,000 a year is so many miles per kilometer, so many dollars per mile that we're anticipating at the beginning of the program, and we'll have to adjust that as we go year by year. There's so many variables, whether, like next year, if we get an average rainfall, then we don't spend all that money on watering, and if the road can maintain that crust, then we don't get the losses that, so we don't have any averages to base our decisions on yet, if that makes sense. But yeah, we're completely anticipating that 6 year could be doing 3 years doing calcium and then 10 years doing gravel, but we don't. The way it's budgeted in here is every 6 years, there's a ½ inch of gravel and half of the calcium being reapplied.
Bob?
Thank you. Now, a lot of my citizens in our area would like the road widened a little bit more, because they say that 17 meters, we got bigger equipment, they're having trouble passing. And the crown, they said hauling beach this year was really hard with that crown, because when they're passing those big trucks with those everything couldn't keep up, but it would move back and forth. They said it was real bad. Well, you know what the crown, how they are? Those big trucks have the air suspension in them. They said the suspension just went crazy on them this year, just trying to keep them on the road. I don't know,
We try to shoot for 4 to 5% crown. You need that to shed the water.
Yeah.
If you end up going less crown, it's very difficult for the water to shed off, and then you'll have other issues. And if you get into rutting and stuff like that, and holding moisture, those trucks are gonna have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So the little bit of readjusting as you're driving down the road is just a fact of what we have to deal with. As far as the width of the road, you increase the road by 1 meter. We're at an 8.5 to 9 meter top. Increased by 1, that's a 15% increase.
Yeah.
So you could add easily, when we're talking about margins on the construction of coming in within 5% of the total budget, and you increase by 15%, you can see the dollars adding up. Not only that, is we feel that road is completely safe. It's a perception thing, where operators that are used to driving on gravel roads know that a typical gravel road has loose gravel or soft shoulders on the shoulder. With our product that's out there, we found that those trucks can drive out to the edge of the road without any problems, because there's no loose gravel to pull them into the ditch. The shoulders are solid, and that's a perception thing. And once they get the experience of driving on those roads, it's a much better experience. When you're driving on an asphalt road, those lane widths are 375, which is, so you put two of them together, is 7.5 meters
Yeah.
of driving width. We're out at 9.
Yeah.
So they have an extra 3/4 of a meter already versus an asphalt road. It's just the perception of where you are on the road.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your
Thanks, Rich.
question. Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, like Morris said, we need some public information going out on these types of things. And what we could do is a Q&A or something with Maddie.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thanks for your report. It was very, very well laid out and very detailed because roads are so important to us in the county. And yes, council, we are speaking internally about how to do that public education piece. So that's something we'll be working on in the next little while. But thank you, Rick, for your report. And Municipal Services, honorable mention to Jen too, because I know she did a lot of work as well too, and Devin, so thanks.
So I have one question that's kind of, a lot of people have brought forward. If you add more calcium, are you gonna have more of a slurry every time you have moisture? Or
Okay,
how's that
so-
gonna work?
Well, it's kind of like putting butter in your cookies, right? There's the exact right amount. If you put too much butter, they just flatten and they become sloppy or slurry-like. You need the right amount in the mix design, and we've played with the recipe, and putting a little bit more calcium in up front makes it a little more workable, easier to use, but yes, if it rains or the relative humidity goes up, then the moisture content goes up the same amount if your calcium is too high. And that's why you see, in some cases, you may even see it hasn't rained in a week and you'll see a little puddle on the side of the road. And that may be where they had spilled a little bit of calcium, and that would ultimately end up creating a pothole and other issues. So we have to really monitor and get the data, keep that calcium at the right level. In a dry year, you're probably better to be a little heavier on your calcium. In a wet year, you're better to be a little bit of light. But we deal with averages, and so we're gonna try to hit that sweet spot so we're not attempting to adjust calcium levels from year to year.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure about the cookies, but it sounds like eating canola. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would a normal, just a regular sign, what is the cost of a regular sign? And I'll get to that if you give me an answer on that one.
Well, one sign could probably be in the $200 to $250, $300. A lot of the cost is not in the sign. The sign, depending on the size, would range from $20 to $80. The post is hardware, $10. The big part of the cost is you got to order locate. So you've got a supervisor spending time on the phone, following up on the locates. Do we have to hydrovac or expose any lines? So on average, I would guess you add all those costs together. The truck going out, installing the sign is probably $200 to $300 per sign.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up, this fall when we were hauling beets, and of course it was wet weather, and a couple of the guys said, man, when we turned onto that calcium chloride road, we noticed it was pretty slippery, so, and I was just thinking, if you had a sign down there, slippery when wet.
I think a lot of that, and from going out there and driving, was that the tires of those trucks were full of mud. And it doesn't.
You have cement in there, no. We don't want to do that. There is not a farmer in this world but facts. Anyways, but this is when the guys were actually coming off the pavement back to the field and coming off the pavement going onto the road, and they were empty. And yeah, they noticed the issue of very slippery. Yeah, the farmers don't track.
Good boy. Okay. Any other questions? Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rick. I think you mentioned a couple times during your report just the overall size and the breadth of this undertaking. It was a huge undertaking, and to complete that many miles in a period of time that you did, I think Municipal Services staff deserves a congratulations for that. That was a huge undertaking. But I think you also acknowledged as part of that, there's probably a bit of give and take on the maintenance side because our focus was dedicated to construction. And you highlighted that we're now into a transition period. And I think it's great that you acknowledge that, because now I think we have raised the level of service and we've provided this level of service, and now it's up to us to try and to maintain that level of service and to ensure that we're doing, as you noted, the repairs in a timely manner. And I look forward to coming up with some solutions where we can address issues and where we can address it. Like you said, if it's how we maintain, if it not a complete mill raise is necessary, what those solutions are, because I think that the concerns I hear is now on the maintenance side, and that's where our focus has to be going forward.
Any other comments? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one more question. There's a lot of people are asking about the calcium there and what it do to the equipment and to the vehicles. Can you elaborate a little bit on that one?
Well, it's a hygroscopic chemical that's put in the road, so there is a corrosiveness to it. The fact that it is milled into the depth of the gravel is that calcium is bound in the mix of the calcium. There is a little bit on the top, but typically that slurry is moisture and bentonite and other stuff. There is some calcium in there. Any of the gravel, and if you use limestone, that's also corrosive. A lot of those products that are on the road salt, all of that stuff is very corrosive as well. I suggest if you're having a lot of that stuff on your equipment, to hose it off, just like you would any other type of gravel dust. One of the big benefits is that when the roads are dry, that there is no dust getting up into your air filters and into the rest of your vehicle. So as far as it's a wash, as far as I'm concerned, on the detriment to the vehicles versus the rest of the detriment driving on regular gravel roads.
Just a follow-up question then, or comment. So basically, if we would do the same, that we get that out to the public, letting them know how to handle this stuff. And we all know that in the winters, the highways are all full of salt and gravel and everything like that too. So I mean, this is not nearly as bad, and we do understand that. But it's probably nice to have that come out in the question here.
For sure.
Any other questions?
Just one thing, there was a question about the life cycle costing and where we're funding the debenture. That will come up in budget discussions. Whether it's not part of this report, like I said, but it will come up during budget deliberations of how we fund that debenture.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we could use a motion. Morris? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I'm going to call the question. Receive for information. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's do number 2, pages 44 to 57. Revision to policy 251 market access network. All routes future consideration additionals. Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was generated as we were developing our budget for the 5-year capital plan, and what roads were being identified for upgrade in 2019 to 2023 budget. It's also a notice of motion that was brought forward by Councillor Horvath, and the idea that Range Road 94 be upgraded due to higher than anticipated traffic volume and loading on that road. And we have noticed several maintenance, increase in maintenance efforts that have been put into that road to keep it passable during construction of the Cavendish project in the city of Leavenworth. Only half of that road was identified in the future considerations list in policy 351. And so we're bringing forward an addition of 4 miles on that road to take it from no, it's 1 mile west of 43rd Street, all the way to Highway 845. There's also 2 other segments, small segments of road that were requested to be added. One was brought forward by a resident that noticed there was a substantial amount of hauling going on in front of his house, as well as once we took a look at it and looked at the maintenance effort, there was a substantial amount of effort put into maintaining that road. It has a soft shoulder on the eastern edge of the road for virtually that whole 2 miles. And then there was another segment, the extension of the Bar Hill Road, which when you look at the map, it is only a mile over from the highway, but there's some intensive agriculture operations in that area, and it does meet the criteria, and that one was brought forward by our municipal services staff. Both of those 2 2-mile segments are in Division 7, and they are endorsed by the councillor of that division to be added as future considerations. During the process, we did find out that in the policy we had stated in there that these schedules may be updated from time to time without revision to the overall policy. And we did get a legal opinion that we cannot do that. So we are striking that one sentence from the policy as part of the revision at this time. So the revision includes adding 4 miles of Range Road 94 to make the total length from Range Road 21-4 to Highway 845. We're revising Range Road 21-3 from Highway 520 to Township Road 12-0. And we're revising Range Road 21-2 from Township Road 12-4 to Highway 843. That's supposed to be 845.
You go to the map page, Rick, it shows.
Okay.
Okay? Morris?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those couple of roads in Division 7 down there, and we looked at it, and they certainly should be good, mean there was good potential to have them done. However, I think we should maybe look at our upcoming budget and see where we're gonna be at before we approve them. However, we can endorse them, and not necessarily for next year, or might be done the year after, like I'm talking about year 20. But if the budget allows it, yes, then I certainly endorse it. Let's put it that way, yeah.
Rick?
Yeah, so this process that we're going through has nothing to do with the budget. This is not approving the roads to be done. This is approving the roads to be put on the list that administration can bring forward for consideration. Okay, it's just to help facilitate the process is that we have a list that's already approved by you guys to bring forward. You guys will say during budget, we're only approving to do 4 miles, or we're doing 24 miles. Until that point, we don't know, but we'll prioritize, and during that process, we'll bring forward the roads that we're recommending to be done in the following year. So, and just so you're aware, just because somebody made a request does not mean they made it to the list. We did have one with Councilor Campbell out in Division 5, that the request came in from a colony, and there was no rationale to have those roads meet the standard for stabilization. They were kind of an internal colony type thing that, without upgrades to their whole road structure in the colony, it made no sense for us to stabilize that road or add it to the list at this time. If it comes forward in the future, we will suggest it gets added at that time.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to make a further comment about Range Road 94. We are in discussions with the city because obviously the amount of increased traffic because of the construction of the Cavendish plant. So we're hopeful that some of that funding will be offset.
Okay, any other questions? I think Mark's already did. Oh, nobody did, all right, sorry. Any further discussion? Call for the question, those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
I don't think we'll have time to tackle H3. I think that's a little lengthier discussion, as it is already 10 minutes to 12. Do you want to go for lunch, or do you want to try Shaughnessy Community Association? Shaughnessy? Larry? Oh, page 73, 76. Oh.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Just a request is before you here on page 73 to 78 as noted. The Shaughnessy Community Association is looking to apply for a community, what do they call it, Community Facility Enhancement Program grant to upgrade and replace the roof of their community hall, which apparently is in desperate need of improvements there. So in the past, council has historically provided just simply letters in principle of support without committing any funds or any further commitments. And that's really all the group is asking here. They seem to be a very robust group with about 40 volunteers. They hold numerous fundraising activities throughout the year to raise money for their various events. And again, they're merely looking for a letter of support from county council. There are no financial commitments at all, no financial implications, particularly with respect to this request. And providing such a letter of support is in line with the county's strategic plan pillars of supporting excellent quality of life and developing and maintaining strong relationships within the region. On page 75 is the actual written letter of request. And Mr. Chairman, I'll just point out on page 76, there is a proposed draft letter that if council is in support, we would simply be seeking your signature, and the letter could be sent off in prompt fashion. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder, is the CFEP program provincial or federal?
Provincial, I believe.
More provincial, yes. Definitely not federal.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Not that it was that important. Thank you.
So Larry, do they own that building, or do we own that building?
Excellent question, Mr. Chairman. In this case, they own the building. There's another community association hall in the county that the county owns the building. Something related to that may be coming forward to council in the near future as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions or discussions? Claus?
I would like to move that council provides a letter of support to the St. Shaughnessy Community Association, because these people, yeah, like Larry said, do a tremendous amount of work and they're keeping that up. And we just had a beef supper there for raising funds, and that it was very well attended, so I think these people are well worthy of a letter of support.
Anything else on that? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Try the next one. Town Roper letter of support. And that was a hand up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On 5, where I have that inserted here, okay. So hopefully all council members have this short report and letter of request from the town of Nobleford. And to sum up, they have requested simply that Lethbridge County provide a letter of support regarding the reduction of the speed limit along Highway 519. The actual recommended motion is that county council send that such letter of support to the town of Nobleford regarding the reduction of speed limit on Highway 519 from 100 kilometers down to 70 kilometers between the traffic circle and Outlook Acres subdivision as requested. There's not really any previous council direction per se on this or policy. It's a one-time request, a unique request. And this issue was first raised before us at the September 18th, 2018 intermunicipal committee meeting with the town. And the reason for our recommendation is simply that it supports municipal neighbors and strengthens their request to Alberta Transportation. Their letter talks in detail. You will see it's a 2-page single-space letter, fairly detailed there, but it really has to do with safety, and there's been a fair bit of development. There are quite a high number, I believe 13 or 14 entrances along that short strip of land with vehicles coming and going, and it really comes down to the safety issue. So again, Mr. Chairman, we are simply proposing that county council support their request and that we send a letter to the town. And in fact, it's not presented here, but I know that a letter has been drafted should the council vote to support and send this letter to our neighbors in Nobleford.
Thanks, Larry. And just to follow up, we had an IDP meeting Wednesday with Nobleford, and Larry was not in attendance. And they did receive some feedback from the Transportation Ministry in which they suggested that there was only a portion that could be lowered, the speed limit. So they would still like our support because they are going to go back to the minister and request that it be extended for the whole section, right from highway. Yeah, right from 23 all the way through to the turnoff. So
They suggest 80.
yeah, 80.
So, Rick?
I do a lot of writing of these type of things, and it's not really written properly in their request, nor is it written properly in our, I would just say we support them in their request, and then we'll help them with the wording, because it should say from the 40-kilometer-an-hour zone at the chicane into the traffic circle, because it reduces from 70 to 40. And then it should say to whatever distance we want past the approach into the whatever road it is. We can't say Outlook Acres subdivision because there's no distance associated with that. So when we write that, we have to have specifically where we want the traffic reduction done. So I just say in our solution here, we just say we support them in their application.
How long a distance is that from the chicane to?
2 miles.
Okay. Any other discussion? Oh, Steve, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personally, I would be supportive of what Alberta Transportation has proposed. more or less the 80 kilometers around the intersection into Nobleford. I see that as where the problem is. That's where that's just where the problem is. So I would be supportive of that instead.
You're making a motion, Steve? Okay. Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They're asking for a speed reduction at 70, right? In the 11, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm supportive of that. I know the area, and I don't think it's a big deal that they would be able to implement that from the traffic circle to just past the intersection of Nobleford down there. I think it make a lot of sense. So if you want me to make a motion, Steve, I certainly would like to. Okay, then I'd like to move that we, with the right wording and everything else in down there, that we're supportive of Nobleford's request that we support them in the reduction in speed from the traffic circle to just past the main intersection of Nobleford at 70 kilometers.
So I just have a question. How many residential areas do we have on the south side? Like, should that go to the end of those kind of subdivisions?
That's that Outlook Acres.
Yeah.
They got one, they got 10.
But not everybody has an access directly to the highway, do they?
No, it's one access.
Just one? Two?
No, one. No, the number 2 is not, is O-Ring, that's totally separate.
But it's still connected to the other road.
Yeah.
Number of them along the way there.
So would that be better if we were gonna change it? At least go to the first.
Well, Mr. Chairman, like, the line of thinking was down there, if you just went past the main intersection of Nobleford down there at 70 kilometers, and we just had the entrance to the 11 residents over that outlook down there. By the time they speed up again, I think it's not gonna be a real issue anymore, because it is just the one coming out of there. That's why, and I think we have a better chance that transportation might look at it that way.
No problem.
So that's all the way from the intersection?
How long ways?
23?
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of businesses there too.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's also an area from the chicane to, I don't know how many 100 meters it is, but it's already at 70, leading into the roundabout. So there's a distance there that's already at 70, so to bring it back to 100 and back down for the approach is not
Feasible.
Yeah. But 80 might be, maybe it's a reduction 80 and then 70 as a.
Clause?
And the speed around the roundabout is 20.
Yeah, well, I think it's 40 actually.
No, it changed to 20.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Did it change back again to 40?
Never was one.
Yeah.
No, it's 40.
I thought they had put it in line. Oh, well. That's their business. Okay. Any further discussion? Morris?
Yeah, just one more thing, Mr. Chairman. Like, if you go to 70, they're probably going to be reluctant to do so because they were reluctant to do certain things already there anyways. But if they see that we got 70, they might suggest that we should go 80. So that's what I think could happen.
Thank you, Councilor Zeenstra. Any other discussion? I'm going to call the question then. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Very hard to know.
So who wants to move lunch?
I'll move lunch.
All in favor? Yeah, let's do that one. J1, 2018 tax option reserve, 77 to 79.
Hey, can you ask Wes to come
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just asking Les to come in in case you have any questions that he can answer for you. So we do have a tax sale coming up on November 30th. We have 3 properties listed there in the report that are on the tax sale. Excuse me. And as per the policy and the MGA as well, council must set the reserve bids for those parcels, as well as the terms, which are cash or cash type equivalents, just meaning that we don't accept payment arrangements for tax sale properties. Excuse me. So Les has attached schedule on page 79 there of the properties there with the reserve bids that are suggested of 180, 100, and 200,000 respectively. And I just need council to set those bids so that we can proceed with the tax sale on the 30th. Any questions?
So when they bid on something, do they have to give you, say, 10% down, or how does that work?
No, basically, the day of the auction, they pay the full, they're gonna write a check or have it certified it's gonna be before they walk out after the bid comes in. One check, or a suitcase full of cash.
I can give just a little further background here. So after 2 years in arrears, a property can go up for tax sale by the municipality. We have made as many attempts as possible to contact people that are on the over 2 years arrears list. These 3 properties are just haven't made any payments, and despite all attempts to contact, are still in arrears. So that's why they're up for tax sale.
We're still working on getting a hold of the last one.
And how big are they, just out of curiosity? Like, is it just a lot, or any acres, or?
Yeah, the first one's a lot in Shaughnessy, and the second 2 are, one's a 10-acre piece, the other one's around an 80-acre piece. They're landlocked actually on the Indian Reserve, so you can't access them without trespassing.
The second and third piece?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a question too, I'm just not familiar. If, you mentioned that if they come in and pay, do they have to pay in full at this point? All of the arrears?
They have to bring it up to current, yes?
Yeah.
And how long do they have to do that? Like, is it right up until?
Right until 9 o'clock in the morning of the auction.
Okay, thank you.
But we have indications from the second 2. They're not interested in making payment at all. It's kind of an estate sale there. They basically want it gone, so we don't expect any payment there. The first one, the lot in Shaughnessy, we are trying to get a hold of the owner. Phone numbers have been disconnected and whatnot, so a little bit tricky trying to track that person down, but doing what we can with registered mail and everything. So we've done our due diligence on our end, but if they do come and pay it off, then it's good.
So just out of curiosity, you said the last 2 have no legal access. So how could you sell them to somebody then? Unless you
Well,
amalgamate it to
actually,
somebody else's title.
More likely, if we do take title to it, we probably won't be selling it.
You mentioned it with the reserve property.
Also, they're basically west of the river. Kind of entangled in with the Indian Reserve there.
Could paddle across the river to gain access, but they're reserved. The surrounding properties are owned by the reserve, so
So you wouldn't be able to get to them without trespassing on the reserve.
yeah, they're They're old historical properties.
Yes, that's correct, just west of Sunset Acres. You overlook across there, they got those, there's some oil wells down there on the river.
Yeah.
River plain there.
Okay, so how does that work? Like about that?
The original survey from 1876 that had it in the, as part of the county, it's, the river shifted. So,
What was the road?
Would it possibly be that there's no road access because it was so long ago it was river access? Is that what you're saying, Les? Do you think?
it would have been,
Water access?
would have been able to reach it from down, it would have been farmed with some other farm parcels, so more like, they're been developed more like a grazing lease floodplain, so it would have been accessible from the county.
Pause.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how long have these taxes not been paid?
2 years, so there's more than two. There has to be 2 years in arrears before they go on to the tax sale, so there's generally, by the time this process happens, there's the current and 3 years arrears.
So you went back to 1877, you said. So was there maybe not a reserve there at the time?
Oh, no, on that, that was when the county, when they did the actual, those township range plot surveys and put everything, that's like when they did the physical surveys with the actual chains back in the 1800s, that whole township system. So the river was on the, would have been,
On the west side of it.
yeah, so so it shifted to the west, so it was more on the east. And it would have been east of the river bank at the time.
Thank you. So, is anybody running that land, or is it just gone to waste right now?
It's just
Sitting, nothing.
vacant as far as I know.
Vacant, no house or no nothing on them, or?
No, you never be able to build on it, it's right down on, it's the river bottom floodplain.
So the weeds are.
It's just too bad you guys weren't around that year. That was quite a flood in that year, 1876. It was pretty brutal.
You were there.
I'm not gonna use a knife, but is it possible that we struck them bricks to get at them?
Any other discussion or questions?
So as Les mentioned, we don't expect that those pieces will be sold because they're not developable, they're not accessible, so the county will likely take them over, but we still do need to set a reserve price on them just in case.
So where are you?
They're right in here, to us.
Yeah.
Just
Just on,
It's beautiful area.
yeah, there's, yeah, it's just kind of this piece.
Over.
There's.
Nice place to build a house.
But yeah, there's no way unless you come in off the,
So there is a road to it.
no, that's all, that Indian reserve is all private, basic private property.
There you go, yeah, so there's these two, right? This one and these two. So you do have access to the river, but not to this one here, there's no access.
Any other questions?
Well, if I may, Mrs.
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. You know, that looks like to be a pretty odd situation down there for that, those couple of parcels down there, but you know, is it a possibility that we basically hand it over to the reservation? Because, you know, if you don't, it keeps on coming up at the administrative end of it, then it's just a burden to us, I think.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mr.
Ross.
Chairman. I was just gonna address
Oh, sorry.
Ross's question there. It still has to go for sale first, and then if the county assumes ownership of it, then there's probably that's something that could be looked at as well.
Laws?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a neighbor, and he had land close to Waterton there, also on the reserve, by the reserve. And he had to share it with his brother. Brother gave his half to the reserve. They were not allowed to accept it. So maybe you want to inquire on that first.
We have to assume ownership first, so.
Yeah, and there's an actual, an Alberta land title on it, so they'll have to dissolve it and
And if not, they don't work down, I'll accept it.
Dory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to move the recommendation to approve the reserve bids and condition for the 2018 tax sale.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, call for question. Those in favor, opposed, carried. Thanks. Yeah. Well, we can do the budget if you want. Now, while we're here.
Okay, Maddie and Jen are gonna present this.
Pages 80 to 119.
So Maddie and I are going to present the results of the budget survey. I've asked Maddie to help out because she was responsible for getting the survey compiled and put together. I did a lot of the communications side of it. So administration issued a budget survey that ran from October 1st to November 1st, and we had over 100 respondents to the survey. The final number was actually 111. Full analysis of the comments and results of the survey have been included in the attached document, so we'll go through that in detail. One of the common messages that administration took away from the survey, and it has been included in the list of recommendations, is that the county could better inform the public of planned work and as to when specific work activities may be taking place. There seem to be a lot of comments regarding mowing and different things, and I just think maybe work plans being issued to the public, et cetera, could be helpful, but we'll get into the details of that as we get to the recommendation side. So I just wanted to add that before we initiated the survey, we did go into it with some goals and strategies in mind, and some projected outcomes, maybe longer term in nature if we continue to proceed with this. But one of the goals was to inform the local stakeholders of the county's key spending areas and build a knowledgeable community. So within the survey, we tried to focus on services, service activities that the stakeholders could relate to rather than actual, I mean, we did put budget numbers in there, but I think things that they could relate to and respond to was better information. We want to provide the residents and other stakeholders with the opportunity to share their input on the county's budget for 2019. And we wanted to share the county's budget message, as well as promote engagement and connectivity with the citizens and stakeholders. So that's part of where we came up with our slogan for the budget, which was stay informed, get involved. So it sort of puts the onus back on the stakeholders to involve themselves as well and get the information. So our strategies, we did the budget brand, which I just spoke to, and aligned it with the county's guidelines to ensure consistency throughout the messaging of the survey and any communications that were being issued. So I want to thank Maddie because I think Tracy and I had her do about 50 different types of logos, and before we settled on something we were all happy with. We wanted to have innovative feedback tools by developing the online approach to the budget survey. So, and you'll see in the results how we kind of develop that, because Maddie can probably speak to that a bit more as well. This isn't something we were able to do this year, but moving forward in the future, if we continue with these, we would like to conduct more community outreach. So maybe attend some community events, set up a table, have the survey there, allow, you know, some interaction with the public, maybe some more direct information and answers to questions could happen at those events as well. Produce print and paid advertising, which we did do, and we also actually, I don't know if council all saw, but there was Lethbridge News Now and Global had news stories about the county's budget survey. We wanted to spearhead an extensive media relations and promotion, which Maddie did a really good job of. And then we offered a door prize for participation, which we hope would also encourage maybe more people to want to do the survey just for, you know, their little $100 visa. So those are some of our strategies moving forward. So what I'll do is I'll just direct you to page 85, and Maddie can speak to the methodology and limitations of the survey.
So the survey was available for 1 month, October 1st to November 1st. We did have a landing page on our website that we still have with all the budget information. It had a link to the survey. We posted to the social media pages, the county app. We also did have printed surveys available here and at the Picture Butte offices. I didn't receive any back, so I'm not sure why, but and then we also advertised through the website, social media, Sunny South News, County Connection, County Crier. We had signage in the administration offices, the app, and then I'm sure all of you received the informational cards that we had you hand out to your citizens. Then we also did the PSA, as Jen mentioned. So, so we did identify a few limitations in the survey. The first was through the survey design and data collection process. People did have the option to skip questions completely, and we did find that happened with quite a few questions. So in order to gather more complete information and reduce skipped questions, I think next time if we were to do this again, we would have each question be mandatory. And then maybe have options that maybe were not applicable or something like that to get a better idea. Another limitation was the notification and access. So some people might not have access to a computer or a good internet connection or to county locations. So they may not have been aware that we were doing a survey. So we thought that maybe future survey notifications could be sent with the quarterly county connection or utility bills. The third limitation, self-reporting data. Sometimes respondents don't always fully understand the question, or if it doesn't apply to them, that might skew their answer a little bit. And then as well, controlling the sample is not possible when asking for self-reporting. There were no controls that really prevented a non-county person from answering the survey, which it did happen a couple of times. We did have a couple people from the city that responded to the survey, which we omitted the answers from here because they just weren't applicable to the county, so. Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll go through the results. I won't go through all the comments on each one. We'll just kind of hit the highlights and give you our impression of what the feedback is. So we did a few demographics questions at the beginning. So the idea behind this was just to gather this information to get a sense of who within the county was answering the questions, sort of, I guess within which age range was the most popular, what areas of the county they lived in. Interestingly enough, on page 87, you'll see that we still have a significant number of residents who aren't sure which division they reside in, and we did even include the councillor names with that. So Maddie and I have some suggestions on how to improve that type of communication. I would be curious to know if any of these 36% voted, but it's an interesting result to see. We also wanted to know of the respondents, who was a resident of the county, who's a business owner, and who maybe was both a resident and a business owner, because we thought that may also have some effect on how they were answering the questions. So majority of the respondents were residents. And then we just kind of asked more for just our own information as to how long they've owned a business or lived in the county. And 50% of the respondents have been here 20 years or more, so that was interesting. On page 90, we got into emergency services as one of our first questions, and this question was related to an initiative that will be coming forward in the 2019 budget when we present on the 25th through the 27th, and that was with regards to hiring an additional CPO, and we included some of the costs related to that. So as you can see by the graph, and this was one of the things I mentioned earlier with Maggie, we were trying to make the answers, make them easy for people to answer, and then be able to have the results easy to look at. So I think this is an easy graphic to see that between maintain the level of service and increase, that was where the majority of the respondents answered. I would like to note, based on the comments that we went through, it seems that there is some misconception with regards to the duties of the CPOs versus the RCMP, because there were a lot of comments with regards to RCMP and different sort of crime prevention that they would like to see the CPOs do that doesn't necessarily fit under their legislative roles. So that was something that came out of the results there. Our next question was on page 92 with regards to economic development. We just asked the question there, how do you think the county should support the business community and otherwise contribute to a stronger local economy? So I gave these comments also to each of the department heads to review, so Martin was one of those. And you know, some of the feedback, it's mixed bag, but Martin felt strongly that the county could probably do a better job of bragging about our businesses and being proud of what the county has to offer, and in that will create promotion of those businesses just from our end. And then we just asked, how do you think the counties could support the business community and otherwise contribute to a stronger local economy? So taxes, of course, are always a topic that comes up when you're, first of all, discussing budget and most county services. So that was some of the answers. And then broadband internet was also mentioned in the comments. And we did ask a question specific to that, as this has been a hot topic, as we all know. So the majority of the respondents on page 94 indicated that high-speed internet would enhance their business services, and I know this is something the county is already investigating, so I think we're on the right track there as far as the business people in the community are concerned. And then there's just some additional questions or additional comments page. So again, more with regards to high-speed internet, a little bit of taxes, efficiencies, those kinds of things. So they're just comments for council and staff to take back and revisit and maybe consider where we can. On page 96 with Ag Services, we just asked a question. We stuck to the parks portion of Ag Services jobs, or that activity, and just asked how they feel about the park services activities. This got a very high positive response to maintain or the level of service with some increase involved in there. But I think it indicates that the residents or the respondents are satisfied with that level of service at this time. There are comments as well attached to this. Diamond City Park was identified a number of times throughout the comments. I know that Maddie said she did see on Facebook people from Diamond City were putting this out and saying, answer the survey, there's a question about parks, so I think that's where a lot of this is driven from. However, it has been identified in the upcoming budget as well as other parks, so again, I think the county's taken this information and already had some of these plans in place, so again, I think we're on the right track. So overall, though, based on the comments, everyone is satisfied with ASP as a whole. On page 98, with the utilities department, we just talked about water treatment and distribution, how the revenues are collected, and the rate method that we have in place right now for cost recovery of operations. and just asked if the people felt, no, this wouldn't apply to everybody, obviously, because not everybody receives water within the county, but those that answered are really happy with the current cost recovery model, and feel that we should continue with that, which we have, and we've done that in the budget too. The next question was just further to that, a straight yes or no, with comments regarding the rate method. Majority of the comments, not majority, but a lot of the comments spoke to having potable water as an option. We haven't looked into that. I think that is a much bigger discussion and maybe a strat planning item if that's where council wants to go, but the comments and the information is there for council's review. Public Works roads, so we did put in a few questions about the roads and base stabilization. The question on page 98 is more with regards to grading and the reduction of the grading beats from 9 to 8 in 2018. So overall, I felt that the responses were quite positive regarding the grading division changes. You can see by the responses that it's a maintain or increase, so I think that says that of the 84 that responded, they're satisfied with the grading activities within the county. So some increases there they're asking for, but I think that's just par for the course. And then we just asked on the next page if they've noticed a change in service delivery, and majority here said no. So 37% said yes, 43% said no, they hadn't noticed a change. And then we have a lot of comments with regards to roads. I don't know if council's had a time to look at them all, but this area seems to have generated the most comments. There are some positive comments and of course a few negatives. Several of the road projects, or some of the road projects that I've mentioned here, or some recommendations, have been identified in the budget or in the capital budget and will be brought forward through the process as well. We move into budget deliberation. The next roads related question on page 104 was with regards to the dust control program. So currently the county has a 50-50 cost sharing initiative, and we spend about $260,000 there. Going through the budget process, that has been reduced obviously with the haul route maintenance program and the roads being completed in 2018. So, and this is a tough one because not everybody utilizes this program or sees the benefits of the program. So depending on where or how they're answering, there may be some biases here. Feels like the program though, most people would like to maintain it and keep it at the 50-50 split. So 42 of the 80 respondents said they would like to see that program continue that way. We have left it that way in the budget being brought forward as a 50-50 split, so with some reductions as mentioned from the base stabilization program. And then we got to, on page 107, the base stabilization. So just mentioning that over the past couple of years, the county has invested $13 million in calcium base stabilization program, and have realized some efficiencies in the day-to-day operations due to this program. So we just asked if they would like to see this program continue, basically, so maintain, decreased, or increased. And again, 56 of the respondents to this question would like to see the service maintained, while 25% indicated they'd like to see an increase in the service. So I think that's pretty positive and says a lot about how all the initiatives have been taken. We did kind of identify that maybe of the respondents who feel there should be a decrease may not live on or near a base stabilized road and therefore aren't recognizing the benefit, and that's maybe where we're hopeful that's where the other side of that came from. As far as question on page 108 with have you seen a direct benefit from this? So it's hard to say with those no's, again, where in the county they're living. So these are some things that we need to flush out a bit more if we do future surveys. And I won't get into the comments there. I'm sure council's had a chance to look at them. So as we got to the end, we just asked a few more broad questions. On page 110, we just asked, with regards to councils, are you satisfied with the current programs, services, and policies as directed by council? And 50% of the respondents indicated that they are. 24 aren't sure, and 28 said no. So there are some comments at the end. I don't know if council had a chance to look at them all, but I thought that was still a pretty good response. And then, are you satisfied with the current level of transparency from council? And I thought this was very positive, because over 50%, if you add in the not sure's in there, are satisfied with the council's level of transparency. So I thought that was a good result as well. And even the comments kind of identified that, and I think indicated that it shows that council is trying to be more transparent and communicate more with the public. So the two most common on page 113, or not the two most common, but a lot of the common messages was recreation and parks, of course, because that was a big one, that Diamond City, and then the potable water that came up throughout the survey after utilities. We did ask the question again. I know Maddie asked this question in the communication survey as to whether or not the county stakeholders feel that they're receiving adequate communication. So 60% said yes, they do feel that way, which I think is great. And in comparison to the communication survey, where 74% of the respondents felt that they weren't receiving enough information. So I think it just goes to show how much maybe people are paying more attention. We're doing a better job. We have a full-time dedicated position that puts out a lot of information. So I think that's a plus for us. Then we asked if they were aware of the budget documents, annual reports, and popular report that were available on the county's website. And again, I have a high percentage of people responded yes, over 70%. So they know where to find the information and access it, and hopefully if they have the questions, they'll bring them forward. So many of the items, as I mentioned, in the budget survey have been reviewed and discussed, and through staff's sort of pulling together of the budget, a lot of these items would come up in our discussions. So I think we're meeting the needs of the stakeholders at this time, or at least have identified for the most part. And we gave people an opportunity to comment on additional areas within the county or the budget where they'd like to see some changes or items addressed. So on page 118, we have some recommendations moving forward. So we'll go through them each separately. Council would like. So the general recommendations. So under general recommendations 1, it is recommended that a follow-up report be prepared to provide the survey results to citizens and address some of the more common questions and comments within the survey. This might help increase transparency and ensure the public feels they have been heard with regards to the county's budget. So our thoughts on that were maybe looking at some of the more commonly mentioned comments or questions throughout the survey and addressing those specifically. 2, based on the comments, it has been determined that the county could do a better job of informing, which I mentioned at the start of the presentation, and educating public on our services, initiatives, and activity timelines. So this includes working on continuing to maintain open lines of communication to not only citizens and stakeholders, but the business community and their needs. So the county is responsive and transparent in its decision-making that affects citizens, business owners, and potential commercial and industrial ventures. So basically just maybe educating more on our services, activities, timelines, all of those things. Item 3, it is recommended that a budget survey and community engagement be done annually to gather feedback from citizens. So we would like to, learn from this survey, enhance it, and move forward and do another survey next year. Maybe have a longer timeline so we can attend some of those community events and get more active, have some more in-person conversations with the public, and then work on enhancing the survey itself. We did kind of came up with the idea in September there. Maddie and I did some investigation, got in contact with another municipality whose survey I found online. It was actually the city of Thousand Oaks in California. And they were really open to communicating and sharing with us, so I think we could just continue and build on that and really enhance the survey and even get more specific if we choose to. For emergency services, based on the comments in the emergency services section, we feel that we could educate on the different legislative roles and duties of the community peace officers versus the
Donna, did you hear anything from
Yeah.
Randy Taylor?
He is on his way back. He had a couple of text messages of you in the last couple of days, apparently. And that's all we know. And he's on his way back. Like he said, apparently he told you he was coming. He said something close. We didn't see the text, so I don't know what he said, but. So he's not coming. He's not coming.
Yeah.
So Mike.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As for the title of my report, this is an opportunity for us to give you a progress update on our asset management program. Last time we sat in front of council, I believe we were asking for a resolution to allow us to apply for funding through FCM. We received that approval, and since then we applied for that funding, we received that funding, and so we moved ahead with issuing an RFP for a consultant to come in and help guide this program. So phase 1 is now complete. I think in your report it'll say it was nearing completion. As of last week, we are done. We received all deliverables for this part of the program. We're quite happy with what we received so far. And so what did we receive? So phase 1, and this is a little bit distracting. I'll get to this in a bit here. Phase 1 was largely an assessment period. And so this company out of Toronto, public sector guy, I'll refer to as PSD, came in. The idea for this first phase was to build a foundation, a framework to build this program. So we came in through staff workshops, assessed our level of readiness. Where are we as an organization in terms of people, skills, hardware, software, the technology side of this all to build a proper system. And so from that we received a couple of different reports. One was the state of maturity report. You'll see that executive summary in your agenda there. And so what they do is they assess us in comparison against the national average. So we came in varying degrees of advancement. So we were considered advanced when it comes to people, organizational capacity. We have the skills in-house, we have the people in-house to really move forward with this and develop a really mature program. On the weak side of that, we would consider weak side of basic in process. So we have the people in place, we just don't have the processes in place to really bring it all together. So that weakness is identified, of course recommendations come out of that, and we will work to develop that and move forward with the program. Against the national average, I mentioned we're considered quite advanced. In building, we're, especially in Alberta, in our adjacent municipalities, we're quite a bit ahead, developing the program and getting the blocks in place. They also did what's called a systems review. So we look at our technology essentially. What do we have in place? Can we handle the data? Can we work with the data? Can we integrate all that information and systems together to build a central system, if you will? Yeah, we can. We have all that in place. Again, quite advanced in that. Our IT department is very good at staying ahead of that. Weaknesses there, again, it's process. We haven't taken the time to build a process that allows those integrations to happen, allow that data to come into these systems in a standardized method. So, again, we've got recommendations on that. We will be developing what we call a data governance policy. Who will get the data, who will put the data in, how it will come in, right? So that leads into the next step of the assessment was, which they looked at our data. What do we have for asset inventory? Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it enough information about a particular asset? We're pretty good. We have a lot of data. The biggest weakness is aligning where I work in the spatial side and the maps you see, and aligning that one-to-one on the financial side and putting a true value to each piece. sometimes, like our roads, for example, when you look in the GIS, we look at each road as a 1 mile segment, where in the financial side, it could have been 2 miles, 3 miles, and you're applying that dollar amount to 3 miles, it should be on 1 perhaps, or vice versa. So we're working on rectifying that. But overall, we're really good. So one of my big tasks right now is standardizing all of our data to an industry standard. So what you would see us using attribution information, you'll see that in other municipalities and cities and whatnot. Biggest weakness when we look at our asset inventory would be our condition assessments. We don't have a lot of formal condition assessments done across the board on all of our data. We were very good in our bridges, because that's a legislative requirement from the province. We do that on a regular scheduled basis. Our roads are not done, they're kind of done as needed. We'll do a really comprehensive study as per the project dictates. But overall, we don't have a sense of the actual condition of roads that's quantifiable. We know generally this is good, this is bad. How do you put a number to that? So again, we're working on that. We'll hopefully start doing some condition assessments in-house where our skills allow it. So those are the main assessments that we got. 2 main deliverables as well. Through all that, our asset management team received training from PSD. And that training came part and parcel with them asking the questions, showing us the weaknesses, making the recommendations. And that's just getting a better understanding of asset management theory, principles, best practice. So in phase 1, moving from that, we also got the beginning of the implementation of the citywide software, which we've had in-house for a few years now. We've just never had the data and processes in place to really implement it and understand how to work with it. And so we started doing that. And that's what at the end of my report, I wanted, if possible, show you an output of that, how we interact with that. So, and the software being how we interact with the whole process, right? There's the asset management program, which is your people, your processes, your data gathering, data validation. The software is how we quantify that. We get the charts, the graphs, the numbers, and we start putting the picture together. So as the data matures, the software can become more and more valuable. Right now, we're just starting out. So we've got a pretty good picture and pretty good example with bridges, but we've got our roads data in there, but we don't have enough information about them yet to start really producing results out of it. And so what are we working on with that? We're major asset classes is what we focused on. So mainly bridges, roads, and underground utilities and buildings. Those will be our 4 main focuses as far as data goes. There are 4 biggest pieces of infrastructure so far. So that's basically what phase 1 was all about. So what are we looking for moving forward? We're looking to progress into phases 2 and 3. We've done it in a 3-phase program or idea just to really make sure we're building the program properly, not jumping all over the place. We're really focused. So the objectives of the next couple of phases are to keep building on that. So we'll start looking at things like gap analysis. Where are our weaknesses? Where are the huge gaps? How do we rectify that? How do we close those gaps? Life cycle frameworks, we'll start looking at individual asset classes, and we'll start developing life cycle activities. What are we going to do to that asset at what time, and what's it going to cost us? And the nice thing about that is we can start looking 5-10 years out with accurate numbers. We put proper costs to it, proper activities, and hopefully we realize more value out of each asset. We'll look at risk modeling. I'm going to show you a little bit about that in this presentation here. The risk modeling really helps us prioritize where to focus our work. Give us a really quick, here's the highest risk assets. In the event that they fail, let's look at them in depth and see what we can do or can't do and move from there. Of course, the asset management, one more thing, and that will be level of service. And that will have a lot to do with council in defining those levels of service for every asset. And we'll bring that forward likely in phase 3 once we have more data to go on. And of course, the final deliverable at the end of the day will be an asset management plan. And the hope is, the intent of this asset management plan is to have it be a living document, not a one and done, where we get a binder this big, goes on the desk, might never get opened again. 10 years, you do it again. This is something that we hoping to take authority over, and through the constant data maintenance, all the inputs will have a document that's always developing, changing, will always be relevant, and always be accessible whenever we need it. So the success of this program relies right now building this framework, doing it from the bottom up, not the top down. It'll drive the strength of the asset management will allow the county to really plan for their capital projects with a strategy in mind, more strategic planning when it comes to works to be done. Be data-driven, quantifiable, less subjective, certainly aligns with the county's desire to continue to be strong in their accountability, good governance and management excellence and infrastructure sustainability. And that's really my report for the update part of it. What I'd like to show you on this, just kind of, it's one of the outputs you can get from the software. Now this is just screenshots, it's not a demo of the software itself, because those likely fail in the event you're under scrutiny. So I'll keep it to screenshots. So, in asset management, one of the main things you really look at is risk. That's what you want to look at first. If this asset fails, whether it be a road, bridge, building, we don't, our infrastructure is pretty basic, we don't look at recreation facilities so much, but if it fails, what does that impact in terms of dollars, social consequences, operational, strategic, all those things, right? So this is what is risk then? It really comes down to what's the likelihood of failing, and if it does, what's the consequence of that? The International Standards Organization, which is what our asset management program, we're trying to align to that the best we can. Simply the effect of uncertainty on your objectives. And of course, this aligns with typical municipal objectives of, delivering your desired level of service that we'll get into further along in the program, and how to align with your strategic plan. So we look at probability of failure. These are the types of items or contributors that we're looking at. Large part of it is condition-based. Right now, a lot of our assets, we have age-based conditions, which is not usually a true indicator of the actual condition of an asset. So we're working on remedying that with our formal assessments. And different approaches that you can take to that. Other contributors that accelerate this deterioration, a lot of this we take into account average daily traffic, commercial traffic, especially around here. Extreme weather events, we see that each spring with our overland flooding. These all have an impact on how fast that road or bridge will deteriorate, right? Then when we look on the consequence side of it, this is where we define what that consequence is. We look at economic, put a price tag on the replacement of each asset in the event that it absolutely fails. The social side, what's the impact to our residents? This could be in terms of driving times. Social could also be, what's the feedback to the county? What's the public image like if these assets start to fail? Then you keep going down this environmental. I don't know that so much impacts us, but in the event say a bridge fails or a road fails, now you've got drainage issues, you've got water going where it shouldn't go. Now you've got environmental damage, you've got damage to property, here comes your social aspect back into it. So we start looking at things like that. And then here's a little look at the software. And it's really basic in terms of defining our ranges here. So here we're looking at condition. We range it from very poor to very good. And depending on the rating he gets, those are our CAT ranges. So 0 to 30% rating, we give it a very poor condition. And of course, the further up you go, the better it gets. And this is set by the standard that the consultant set. We can change this in the future as we refine the data, refine our processes. We can decide, what, we don't really agree with this, maybe we want to adjust them a little bit to be more suitable to the county. So we look at probability of failure. In this model, this is specific to bridges, I should add, because this is our most confident data set. We've got the best information right now, most complete. So we look at condition, we look at traffic, the probability. The older it is, more likely it is to fail. The more traffic it gets, the more likely it is to fail. May not happen, but those are contributors that would accelerate that, right? And on the other side, we define a metric. What's considered insignificant, what's considered severe on the other end. So 0 cars a day is 600 plus would be considered severe. And then condition, you've seen that in the previous slide, we got a 0 to 90 essentially. And then we get into the consequence side, and this is where we really get to decide how we feel about the risk that we're willing to take and how that plays into the overall picture. So economic is typically your highest risk. That's your dollars. Should that asset fail, what kind of dollars are we looking at? Are we ready for that? And so we defined it for this purpose of this model. 100,000 or less is insignificant, all the way up to 1.5 million above for replacement would be significant impact, significant risk. And then you go down the chart there, and you can add as many metrics as you want in here. You can come up with different factors. You start applying those weights. Operation will be, things like it says there, number of spans. Are we looking at a multi-span bridge, or are we looking at a single culvert? Different, right? Social side, detour length, estimated traffic. How many cars a day are you having to have detour now because of that failure or interruption in service? And strategic, we're looking at. This comes down to try to explain it. In the event that bridge fails, is it on a haul route? Is it on a paved road, a higher traffic road? How does that impact your market access network, your economy? So the strategic side then comes in there. If it's a low volume gravel road that's in the middle of nowhere, it's not a big of an issue. So what does that look like? I'll show you a few different ways. First, what does the model do? So this model gives a picture right away, helps us prioritize our inspection, maintenance, capital budget, reserves our budget at the time, and then we're testing green filters. So this first one, this is our data, this is our bridge information. And so generally you can see green is good, red is bad, or hot. It's that simple. So on the bottom you see the probability, 1 through 5. Obviously the higher, not good. And if we go up the other side on the consequence side, what you're going to see here literally is a red flag. You've got an asset up there that's $4.6 million value, showing it's a high risk, high probability. Is it a high risk? Economically, yes. Is it a high probability? We're not sure. That's something we're going to look into. But you'll see, and this is only taking into account 3 contributors. All we're looking at here is condition, traffic, and replacement costs. Simply, we're not taking into account any other factors. As we continue on, we add another contributor. Now we're looking at the social side of it. And it's hard to see any major changes in there. You'll see some assets moving around a little bit. What you're going to see now is you get into 5 contributors. Now you're looking at traffic and detour distance. So another social contributor. And you'll see now that $4.6 million bridge has dropped down in the risk side of it. And a few assets have moved around in the probability. Traffic might be less in certain areas, so the probability or the risk is lower. And then the probability is lower as well because of the same reason, less traffic. Right? So then the final one I've got here is we look at 6 factors, and we can add as many factors as we can dream up, as long as we can justify them. You'll see that bridge has now come down in the risk side a little bit lower, stayed at the same probability. So if we were working with the software right now, what we could do is each one of these boxes is interactive. I can say, oh, what is this all about, this $4.6 million bridge? I can just select that, go in, show me where it is, and it'll start telling me everything about that bridge. When was it built? You can put in pictures, you can put in the blueprints, you can put in estimated costs of, current construction costs, I should say. So you can start looking at all these metrics in behind the information and say, oh, there's something that's an error, we need to fix that. So what this does is shows us where we may have high risk, it also shows that we may have errors in the data. So it becomes a prioritization tool for planning, but also a data validation tool for those their assets. So the more contributors you add, better refinement of data you get, better information you can get out of the system. So that's all I've got for my presentation. Any questions?
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess what's your next step is more or less just inputting data on or into the software and all the assets?
Yeah, so that's one part of it. So we'll continue to look at, this for example shows us we've got a bridge that we know is not likely to fail. That bridge, to be specific, is our CPR bridge over on Kid Road. Right, we know it's not gonna fail. We've had inspection done, but it gives it a 44% condition rating, so we're gonna question that, see what's going on. But then when we look at the big picture here, we go, okay, we've got a 5-span major bridge lumped into the same category as a single-span culvert. So it does the same condition rating, have the same weight. So we're gonna look at replying that data, breaking it out on the bridge side. For me personally, a lot of it is data validation. So right now I'm working on our utilities data. I'm taking our 2010 asset management plan when they did an inventory. I'm taking our spatial data now, our financial data, trying to align that. Is what we see what we have and where it is, and are the true costs put towards that. And at some point we'll work on getting formal condition assessments. That's outside the scope of probably this three-year, three-phase program. That'll be an ongoing effort. That'll be a big task. We'll keep working on refining our processes. So one of the first things we'll do moving forward is start defining a data governance policy. Right now we don't have anything that directs how we do everything. We realized that is a big weakness. We've got people with software, et cetera, in place. Now how do we build that process? So we're working hopefully with the consultants to build that. That'll be a key piece. And we'll bring in more people other than just the asset management team into that picture as it develops. If that answers your question.
So I have a question for you. I guess when I sit here and I look at this, for almost $250,000 in total expenses, you already should know the life expectancy of every bridge and every road in the county. So I'm kind of lost as to where this is going to make it any better for you.
So right now, when you think of asset management, you have a life expectancy. We can build a road today and say we expect 50 years, 70 years, et cetera, out of it. And if you look at the data now, if we were to pull this up for roads, it would say you need to replace every road today based on the age of it. So then when we start looking at it, we're like, well, we know that's not true. So we start doing these assessments, we start building these programs, and then you start breaking out the roads and see where your problem areas are and give them a true evaluation of the condition. And then you may not necessarily be doing work on a road you don't need to be, or maybe you're missing roads where you should be doing work and you're not. Because now we do it more on a subjective basis where we think we know where the problems are. On this side, we're letting the data drive that. Now, in terms of the dollars, as we build this, we should start realizing we have more value in our assets than we might think. So we'll start seeing savings in where we don't need to do work necessarily, and we are. Or we need to be focusing our efforts on other areas. That makes sense.
Sorry, not to me, but Claus?
I'll ask another question here. Looking at all these numbers here and you're going by life cycle analysis of both stick to the bridges and stuff. Are these all physically inspected on a regular basis in order to see that you are correct in what you're doing?
Yeah. I can't speak to the regularity of depending on the type of bridge, they have to be inspected every so many years. If Cole was here, he might be able to speak to that better as to how often but they are on a schedule. We have to inspect so many per year. Okay.
Right. Yeah, they're inspected every 57 months for our standard bridges, and that's an 18 requirement. put into a BIM system where we track all these assets and condition.
And there are rules and regulations that this has to be done every so often, or you just base it on the material and everything that you have with the bridges and when they were built and so forth?
Yeah, this is a requirement from Alberta Transportation for all municipalities.
As far as the rest of the assets go, as far as we know, there's not any sort of legislative requirement to do on a scheduled basis. We just undertake that for our own purposes, getting a better picture of what the actual conditions are on roads and buildings and things of that nature.
Ken?
Yeah, so when the bridges are checked all the time, you record, like, I know a little bit about it, but not much, that you take all the information that was 1 year, put it on a sheet, and then 57 months later, get another one. And so once you get a lot of it together, then you can figure out what the risk management is and stuff like that. Because I'm assuming that by looking at that and getting it done you should be able to compare that bridge with something else or am I way wrong?
So, I just want to understand the question. So every time these condition assessments are done on a bridge, that information would get updated into the system. We wouldn't compare it against every other inspection on the same bridge that way you're asking?
Yeah.
No, we would just take the most recent value, or not valuation, but condition.
Okay. Okay. That's all.
No, Rick.
Well, just on that, those regular inspections, certain things in those inspections will trigger, you'll get a rating, say a 2 to an 8. Once you get down in that 2 rating and those assessments that are done on a regular basis, it'll trigger what we call a level 2 assessment, which is an independent. They come in and it's a more intrusive test on the bridge structure, on they'll actually drill into the wood piles and see if there's any rot in there and those type of things. And then they'll give it an additional rating of whatever, and if it's 2 or less, and you heard us talking about if it's a 2, you have to replace it within about 18 months. If it gets a 1, I don't know if you remember it, when the guy said, basically he takes his pants off and starts waving them in the air and nobody go across the bridge, kind of thing. He actually said that in our open house the one day, so that's kind of what that triggers. But all of those assessments go in, and the data gets put into a program that gives us the ability to look at all the bridges at one time and what our total risk is. And this is, it's not just the numbers on there, it's the colors are representative of where we have to focus our efforts. Right, so.
And just to follow up on your point, Rick, being familiar with asset management, having this plan in place is going to be really valuable to the county because we'll be able to make long-term decisions on our assets and where we're spending our money, our capital dollars. And I know Alberta's probably in the same boat, but what happened in Ontario is very shortly after they started implementing this, the funding dollars were tied to the asset management plan and whether you had one in place or not. So it's twofold. Somewhat it's funding, but the other piece too is it's going to give us a very good background and inventory on what we have and what its date it's at, and so that will give us good planning tools moving forward.
Rick, and then Steve.
Yeah, so I think what you guys are probably familiar with is the TCA program that was, what, 2007 to 10 and 9? Okay, in that range that across the country, everybody talked about the infrastructure deficit. Basically, that's all it did was calculate what your deficit is. And that was all based on age-based assessment and where each item is in its life cycle. So it just said, okay, you guys are $30 million in debt or $300 million in debt. This actually gives us the ability to break that down and say, no, we're, like Mike said, we're not $30 million in debt. Some of those assets can last another 50 years with minimal input. But without having the data and tracking all the data and analyzing it amongst all of the infrastructure that we have, it's difficult to tell where we are in keeping up with the deficit.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, it's more than just roads and bridges, which is the obvious thing to us that we see. I mean, it's the underground infrastructure of water and sewer that it's gonna grade. What's most, or what's more apt to fail the soonest, I guess. Because I mean, the underground, we can't see, I mean, it's, all of a sudden it can fail. At least this might give us a little bit of a heads up or a warning towards that, right?
That's the intent, yeah, and further, the value of this is, and you speak to it, so if you're planning on paving a road, for example, once this data matures and the system is set up and we're confident in what we have, you can go in and you can say, we're gonna do works on this road. It'll tell you, hey, FYI, maybe you should look at why you got the road torn up, replace this piece of pipe. Because last thing you wanna do is pave the road and realize, oh, that was about to fail. So once we get it set up and we have the utility side of that, talking to the bridge side, or sorry, not the bridge, but the road side of it, we'll start to see that information come up when we start using this as a planning tool.
Any other questions?
I can just speak, Mr. Chairman, just to the dollar amount. I'm not sure if it's been discussed with you guys or not. The reason we're asking for, will be, sorry, in the budget presentation is because the FCM funding, the whole program was canceled during that time, the municipal asset management program. We had expected when we started to receive 50,000 for each phase of the project. And then in September, they announced they were over allocated. We were gonna apply anyway. And then as we were doing our application, they announced they were closed, they had no dollars left and wouldn't be looking at anything for, again. So we are looking at other grant and funding opportunities. We haven't found any that are relevant to this program yet, but we are working towards that, so.
Buzz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, looking at the life cycle of name the bridges here, because we know that a lot of our bridges are in the end of life stage, anyway, quite a few of them. And without this funding, how are we gonna find the money to be able to do what is necessary to keep them functioning? Because like for example, you see, well, just an example of Quebec with the way the bridges went and everything like that, they're in big trouble there. So I mean, we're not at that stage because we see it coming, but I mean, yeah, where do we get the funding from in order to compensate for the FCM funding?
Just in terms of this project, how do we pay for it with funding or grant funding? Well, grants we're not sure of. We're looking into that. Amelia's researching to see if there's anything available. In terms of this project, where would we get the dollars from out of our budget? I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Jen to speak to that. I believe she's looking to MSI dollars to fund the remainder of this program, next few phases. Other than that, I'm not sure where the money comes from. As far as the bridges go, yeah, right now we use the provincial payment system, and that system makes recommendations on when to replace and what works to do, whether it's floor replacement, whether it's rehab of some sort. Currently, right now, that's where we get that information from, and that's why this is more robust than Sarah Rose, because we haven't built that extra data in there.
I just want to mention too, like I've seen asset management plans done different ways, and the best asset management plans have really good condition assessments. We're fortunate because internally we have a really good team working together. We've got IT, GIS, and finance people all working on it together. So we've laid some really good groundwork. So moving forward, and we've had some conversations internally, we have to make sure that when we do our condition assessments, they're very accurate, and that'll make our data better and our whole program better.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I guess we can use a motion. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Well, I think we have the capabilities of handling it before, so I don't see the point in it. How's that? You know, because it's mandatory for the government. Thanks, Mike. I feel this. I'm not feeling because I think we already have the information. I just, like, I don't know what you're wasting $250,000 for. You already have it. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on. Invitations, page or 120 to 122, Council General of Japan. Pardon? Yeah. Did you get one? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move the Region Deputy Reed be authorized to attend.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 123 to 124, Nikko Yuko Japanese Garden Winter Light Festival, November 30th. And the recommendation is that any member of council wishing to attend do so. Are you again, Steve?
Pardon me?
Is that you again?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know my phone, I can't tell you. So, call for the question, those in favor? Opposed, carried. And the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast, page 124 to 126. And this is sort of an interesting one. Well, because every religious group in Lethbridge comes, they kind of, well, yeah, kind of, but they all support the program that goes on downtown where they kind of homeless or semi-homeless people, you know, go around every day and pick up the garbage and then all the stuff. But the lady who picks up the needles outside here, she's a member of that team. Yeah, yeah, same thing. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the recommendation the Reavers designate attend.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor, opposed, carried. I believe that's it. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
All in favor?